Please note the chat feature is not monitored. Public comment is accepted in person, and a link to the video will be posted to the Diligent Community website immediately following this evening's meeting. To improve the sound while listening to the meeting, please turn up the volume on your computer and turn up the volume on the Diligent Community site. The meeting packet for tonight's meeting is located on the Diligent Community site itself. For those attending tonight's meeting, bathrooms are located in the foyer through the double doors. There are 2 emergency exits from the room, the door behind you and the door through the foyer. And if you haven't already, please sign the white attendance sheet in the podium in the back of the meeting room. This is a business meeting, so the board asks for your cooperation to maintain decorum. Please be considerate and refrain from interrupting board members and other speakers. And again, to improve the quality of sound, there is a boom microphone directed toward the commissioners. The microphone likely will pick up additional audience noise and sidebar conversations. So we are at 6 o'clock, so I'd like to call to order with the roll call.
Commissioner Hemmings is absent. Commissioner James?
Here.
Commissioner Rapp?
Here.
Commissioner Root?
Here.
Commissioner Tyson?
Here.
Commissioner Lesson?
Here.
Commissioner Kodo?
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. The second item on the agenda, additions or changes to the meeting. Are there any additions or changes to the agenda? Hearing none. Number 3, communications. Mr. Peterson?
Thank you, Eric. The packet has communications notably around the tragedy at Elder Lane Pier late night in August. There's also some communications that come from the farmers market for comment cards that President Kodo has collected, and that's pretty much it.
Thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 4, remarks from visitors. As a reminder, remarks from visitors is your opportunity to address the board on any issue. When called upon, come to the center position at the podium in front of the commissioners, speak loudly, state your name for the record, and speak directly to the board. Keep all comments under 3 minutes. As a reminder, this is not a question and answer forum, so please do not expect a response or answer from the park board this evening. If you prefer to share your comments in writing, you may use the comment cards, which are available near the sign-in sheets. Any park district staff will accept your card to be shared with the board. So with that, anybody in the first row have comments, remarks from visitors? Please.
My name is Christine Treesheim, and I'm commenting on the Park District's apparent segue from park stewardship to park sales force under a heretofore unknown policy to sell or get rid of small parks, non-core parks, underperforming parks that they alone in their sole discretion seem to have decided are underperforming and no longer worthy of remaining in the Winnetka Park District system, which I view as truly an abomination, given that this park district has been around since 1904. The Park District Manual generally recognizes in its declaration that, and this is a quote, each parcel of land controlled by the Winnetka Park District and designated as land for recreational purposes is intended to be used by the public. The type of use may vary from a highly developed parcel requiring intensive maintenance to one which is undeveloped and more passive in intended use. So in other words, there's no such thing as underperforming green space. The manual also states at 5.07 that for the sale of real estate, it, quote, in regards to real estate, the Illinois Park Code sets forth specific limitations and procedures governing the sale or lease of real estate and shall be strictly adhered to in all instances. And the case I've read about is Library Park, which was sold on its 100th anniversary. And the Park District initiated contract with Winnetka's Library, in my view, threatening them with selling that park to developers, which would put up condos and townhouses with windows looking into the library. And they said, if you don't buy it, we might do this. And the reason the Park District wanted the money was because it had blown through its budget for Elder Centennial. The taxpayers had bought this already in 1922, and because of the Park District's placement of the library district into a defensive position, the taxpayers had to pay a second time for the same park because the Park District was asking for money for Elder Centennial. I think that's shocking. The Park District's law firm required 3 appraisals for this to go through because of the Illinois Park District Code. And I also looked at the history.
Just to interrupt you for overtime.
Okay. The Park District purchased Crow Island Woods, and that was taxpayer money. Please enter this into the record.
Thank you. Anybody else in the first row have remarks from visitors? In an effort to mix it up. Anybody in the third row have questions for remarks from visitors?
Yes, I felt the need to come up right away given that interaction. Hi, Ted Winichenko. So before I address what I wanted to address, that is interesting. So you understand, of course, that this 3-minute rule is a figment of an imagination of an attorney that the Illinois Attorney General has acknowledged was never made a rule. If you look at your, and I haven't looked at your rules, but it's about being reasonable and stuff. So if you have 100 people up here, then yes, you should impose rules and maybe even a time limit and cut people off. But that 3-minute rule is a guideline that was made up by an attorney for a public body, and then other attorneys have misstated it over and over again. Last year, the Attorney General did agree that the case they're citing is being cited incorrectly. I can give you, if you would like, their decision on that. So I may go over a little bit now. Anyway, the reason I was coming today is because I'm confused about this whole elder thing, right? So first, why is the specter of a land swap still a thing, right? This has been going on for years. It hasn't concluded. Why doesn't this body just say we're done, and then the property owner, if they choose, can sue you, and as they threaten to do for other things, but we should move on. It shouldn't be left hanging as a specter that this is something the Park District wants to do. It should be taken off the table. And I appreciate what's going on at Elderbark, and it's terrible that another person just drowned in the lake, I guess, the other day. But putting up that fence and blocking off access to that whole section, as my email said today, that whole section of Lakeshore, I believe is a health and safety issue for everyone. Because there's no easy way in that section to get back up to the shore. Well, I guess people have apparently cut the block or jumped the fence, so you could do that. As I noted, the box at the bottom of the magnetic gate just is secured with 2 Phillips screws. Easy thing to undo the screws and cut the electrical power and that lock will open. Certainly people can defeat these things, but until you guys decide what you're doing, at the very least, the gate at Centennial needs to be maintained and left open. People aren't allowed to have their dogs off leash there anyway. Why is the public being prohibited from crossing public land to get to the beach? I don't think it's right. Something should be done immediately, regardless of anything else in the thing is.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other remarks from visitors, from individuals in the third row?
Got a new man at the helm here. Good job. Good evening. I'm Mary Garrison, 350 Ridge. So again tonight, I want to remind you of the mission statement that guides the Winnetka Park District. The mission of the Winnetka Park District is to provide leisure opportunities while protecting assets, natural resources, and open space to benefit present and future generations. The Winnetka Park District is proposing to give the Park District open space land under the playground at Crow Island Woods to District 36. This parcel has been used by District 36 since the 50s, it's around 70 years, under a Park District 36 agreement. By transferring this property to the District 36 coffers, nothing changes, except the Winnetka Park District has lost this asset. This land has monetary value, as well as continued and protected open space. Our park district is not protecting our assets by giving this land away. Nothing will change with the Crow Island Playground. The kids will still enjoy it, still have fun. What will change is the protection of the asset and the Board of Winnetka Park District, again, not adhering to the mission statement. It has been revealed that the Park District was pushing the sale of Library Park as a place of open space that was not used or needed by the Park District. The dollars received for this asset was needed for Elder Centennial Project. Seems that if the Park District is forced to rid the asset at Crow Island, the money derived from a sale would be more than what was received at Library Park. District 36 is smiling with this proposed transaction. Why not? It increases their bottom line and it reduces the Park District holdings. The reverter clause 22A is very favorable to District 36. It appears that 22C is combining the 8,000 square foot property for the gym and the 22,000 square foot property for the open space at the Crow Island Playground into one agreement. It is confusing to the citizens when these two transactions are combined. Each agreement should stand alone. The gift of land for the much-needed gym is a solid agreement. Now that it blends with the playground being part of the transaction, it is not clear, it is not solid. The gym transaction, as presented to the public, did not include the 22,000 square feet at Willow. The District 36 board is a very smart board, and this contract describes these two separate transactions. The contract is not favorable to the Park District. Another concern is the newly proposed plan for Centennial and Elder. This property does not need to dig into our bluff to be ADA accessible. Look at Tower Road Beach Park. Look at the platform that oversees the lake.
Excuse me, Mary, we're just at time.
I know, I'm going to finish, please. I don't have that much more. I spent a lot of time on this, and I feel very deeply about it, as you know. So I'm sorry, I'm going to continue. Look at Tower Road Beach Park at the platform. Do that same design at Centennial. Scott Ferris did a beautiful design on that platform. Elder is ADA accessible now, and Centennial would be within the ADA guidelines with a platform that oversees the lake as it does at Tower. Save the money that is proposed for that more extravagant boardwalk. It's been said that the proposed plan at Elder Centennial will attract many to our park. I've heard that said many times up here. Our park is for everyone and does not need to attract more users than it attracts as it exists. I believe that the neighbors would agree. And finally, it's strange that the comments from the emails to the board were part of the board packet this month. I guess they were from the farmer's market with Christine. But I would like to see that trend continue to happen each month and put the public comments in view in the board packet. Thank you for your extra time.
Thank you. Any additional comments from third row?
I promise you I will be brief. Angie Dahl, 1277 Forest Pond Drive in Winnetka. Been a resident for over 40 years. Over the last several years, I think the board and the Park District has been preoccupied with the design, planning, budgeting, and promoting for the Elder Centennial project. In doing so, I believe that the Park District has lost sight of the fact that its primary responsibility with respect to the lakefront and its beaches is to do everything practicable to protect and ensure the safety of the people who use those beaches and facilities. I recognize that the Park Board and the Park District cannot prevent all accidents. However, in recent months, multiple catastrophic injuries have occurred at Winnetka Park District beaches. These possibly could have been prevented with appropriate security to prevent access to Elder Beach, appropriate warnings about submerged shallow water hazards at both Maple and Elder, and appropriate on-site supervision and security at Lloyd. I simply want to urge you to take a long, hard, objective look at your priorities so that you do not find yourselves taking remedial action after yet another catastrophic event occurs on Winnetka Beach. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else from the third row? Susie, please.
Thank you, Eric, and commissioners. Susie Schreiber, 152 Glenwood, Winnetka, and I am here to absolutely support what has just been said by the other speakers, and I am just plain devastated by what has happened on the accidents on the Winnetka shoreline and on Lake Michigan and on the Great Lakes. This summer has seen an incident rise in accidents, and we have a fiduciary responsibility to our families, our children, our residents, to share proper behavior and action when you're down at Lloyd and Tower and Elder and Maple and even your dog at Centennial. You know, but the fact that you are running a open space beach with absolutely no lifeguards and tons of kids coming down there on their bikes and enjoying the beach, which they should be. But there is no one who can see over the rocks, even when you're in the parking lot and just looking out. You cannot see into the coves. And I have seen your staff later this summer occasionally walk down and just say, get out of the water, and just keep walking straight, get out of the water. And they're not looking at the people, they're just, you know, everybody out, and then they turn around and come back. But it's not properly addressing the problem with the residents and saying that there is no swimming down there, but people are using it all the time. And you're going to have an accident, and you also have a problem with not even encouraging people to take their PFDs or personal flotation device on the boards, the paddle boards, or the other equipment. I have watched time and time again, not with jet ski people, but with others in motorboats and on the paddle boards, and they're out there with absolutely no safety device. And I speak from having had an incident in our own family in 1983 out on the lake, and I'm glad that person is alive today and that I will be a great-grandmother soon. But I speak with, you know, absolute sincerity to each and every one of you that the most priority thing that you can do right now is to address your water safety rules at your beaches, and if you're going to open the beach, you better have them maintained by trained lifeguards and personnel. And it's not hard to do. It can be done. It's done at other beaches, big and small. But we are on the Fourth Coast. It's like an ocean. It is not a little pond. And with that, thank you very much, and good luck with the rest of your meeting.
Thank you. I think we've got everybody in the third row. So to the second row. Anybody like to have remarks from visitors?
Good evening. My name is David Williams. I'm here as a friend and representative of the Ishbia family. I wanted to read a statement on behalf of the Ishbia family who wants to be here tonight but could not be due to a prior commitment. It's been almost 3 years since the Winnetka Park District and our family entered into the 261 Sheridan land swap agreement. At this time, we think it's best for us to call that agreement dormant and look to a new and different chapter for Elder and Centennial parks and beaches. Residents of the Winnetka community have repeatedly voiced their desire for the Park District to accelerate the execution of the Elder and Centennial improvement plans so that they and their families can enjoy the lakefront. We've had the opportunity to review the Park District's plans published and dated April 17th, 2023, and subsequently approved by the Park District Board in May of 2023. It is our understanding that the Park District's current budgeting would only allow for the execution of Phase 1 of the approved plan, and that capital restraints would hinder the completion of Phase 2 of their plan. We also understand that that executing both Phases 1 and 2 concurrently would save taxpayer dollars in a meaningful way and expedite the completion of the project. Given that Winnetka will soon be our family's long-term home, we wanted to let the community know that we are excited to move to town and make a positive impact in many ways. The first of these ways in which we'd like to make an impact is to close one chapter with the Winnetka Park District and open a new one. We would like to donate $3 million to the Winnetka Park District to support the execution of the 2030 Lakefront Master Improvement Plan. The donation would help fund several already approved beach improvements consistent with Phases 1 and 2 of the Park District's plan set forth on page 20 and 21 of the handout that was discussed in the May meeting. These improvements include an ADA accessible pathway from the Centennial parking lot to the beach, an off-leash dog park on the south end of Centennial, and a stone breakwater system. Creating an environment where people of all abilities can enjoy the lakefront is a priority for the Ishbia family and the community. Additionally, establishing a long-term off-leash dog park has been a long-time priority for the Park District and the Winnetka community, which we are happy to support. We feel fortunate we are able to contribute in a way to further some of these long-term goals. We look forward to working with the Park District and the Village in a collaborative way to execute on their Phase 1 and Phase 2 of their plan and accomplish the goals laid out in the 2030 Lakefront Master Plan. We hope by accelerating the execution of their plans and creating an environment for people with all abilities and an off-leash dog park, Winnetka families, children, and their dogs will be able to sooner access the lakefront and enjoy our beautiful beaches for years to come. Thank you, the Ishbia family.
Thank you. Any additional remarks from visitors? Thank you. So moving forward to item 5 on the agenda, new business. 5.1, the Winnetka Caucus Council Parks Committee. Mr. Peterson?
So we have been, it's been a great relationship with the Caucus Council and notably the Parks Committee. David Botzett has been terrific, as has Susan Curry, who runs the Caucus Council as a whole. So we're honored tonight to have Susan join us to help us with the recent survey release and the park-specific questions. So thanks for joining us, Susan. If you want to step forward, it'd be great. Thanks for all your efforts.
Absolutely. Thank you for inviting me to speak tonight. We're very excited to have the survey out and live within the community. So please, if you haven't taken it, do. If you have other people in your household who haven't taken it, convince them to do that. I will say that men have historically responded at a lower level than women. So a little challenge there to try and get people to find some parity there. Obviously, our survey is only as valuable as the quality of the input we get from the community, and that's really kind of our next phase of activation now, is to continue to make sure that everyone is aware of the survey, how to get access to it, and we encourage them to complete it. I will say that this year, similar to how another survey from the Park District went out, we did deliver a QR code to every one of the addresses within the Pollerville area, and we're hoping that that will help. I'm pleased to say that as of earlier today, we had just over 500 responses, which is a really nice start. But as Christina has said, our goal is always to get as many as we absolutely can, and there's a lot of good work to be done by the caucus this year. The caucus, for those of you who are not as familiar with it, this year is comprised of 60 members of our community who sit across several different committees and areas, many of whom worked on the surveys, other who are working on platforms and on slating for candidates specifically this year for the village. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have around kind of the survey itself. I will say that you may have noted a change in the timing of the release of the survey. That was very intentional. We looked to release the survey consistent with back to school. We have had a lower response level than we'd like with school-age families, and asking them to pay attention to that. And they were busy wrapping up summer, just didn't feel like we were putting our best foot forward.
Susan, have you any idea when you may have the compilation of data from the survey?
That's a great question. We're working on our timeline now. The survey has a specific close date, so we don't start to work on any of that. We do not look at the data. I know how many respondents, that's as much input as I even have at this point. Once it's closed, we'll take a look at it. We've got a crack team. The great thing is we've got a couple of folks who are much better at technology, and we've got some data specialists on the caucus who are going to be able to do some good work for us this year. Again, robust response is what we need for all of this to really have value and have weight. So we hope to get it out quickly thereafter. We have a tight timeline that we're on because we've got to be ready for the fall town hall, and all of the work and platforms have to go through multiple approvals before we get there.
So you're closing it September 19th. That's what it said in line, number one. And number two, there are 14,500 voters in the Winnetka Park District. Okay, thank you, Susie Schreiber. So I'm aiming for an A+ return for Park District, so that's 95%. So that's what I'd like to see, which would be 10 times what we've ever received in the past, but I think it's good to set your goals high.
It would be phenomenal. We do from time to time, just with any other type of community engagement, there are certain topics that motivate people to participate. We have a typical running average of around 1,200 to 1,500 participants. We had a year 3 years ago where that jumped up precipitously, and that can be attributed to a couple of very specific questions. We certainly welcome all of your support in helping us to get out the word and make sure that we include everyone, particularly in the Park District map, as it is a little broader than Winnetka itself. Other questions?
Thanks so much.
Terrific, thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Item 5.2, fiscal operating policy 7.26, outstanding check policy. Mr. Crocker?
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. As we discussed in previous meetings, our auditors, when they finished the 2022 audit, mentioned as one of the management initiatives to clean up a number of outstanding checks dating back approximately 7 years. Working with our auditors to develop this policy, we've come up with a plan that we would like to present to the board for its review and ratification at the next meeting. The idea behind this policy is that once a year, we will go through those checks. Anything that is 3 years old or less, we will send a certified letter to the vendor to whom the check was initially issued, letting them know that they have not cashed that check. If they do not respond to that check, those checks will then be turned over to the state of Illinois as unclaimed property, which is in accordance with state law. Many of the checks that we reviewed through this process had been reported lost or damaged, so they have been canceled and reissued. So the number of checks that we will be contributing to the state will be fairly low compared to the initial number that we had. But we will be doing this every year in the month of September going forward.
Terrific. Thanks, Jim. Any questions for Jim?
Jim, I think you said that you were going to send notice to the vendors by certified mail?
Yes.
Just to clarify, the draft policy says it's going to be sent by first-class mail, so I just want to make sure that we're consistent with what your intent is.
Thank you for catching that. the goal is to send it to them with a response from the post office letting them know that it was received. So we can do that at the most expeditious, cost expeditious possible.
Just between now and the next meeting, we can just clean it up.
Clear that up, yes. Thank you, Adam.
Thanks, Adam. Moving along to agenda item number 6, unfinished business. Article 6.1, review of intergovernmental agreement by and between the Board of Education of Winnetka Public Schools District 36 and the Winnetka Park District to transfer real property. Mr. Peterson?
Thank you, Eric. I have to give a huge tip of the cap to Kyle Bird, who unfortunately is not with us tonight. He put in quite a bit of elbow grease, as did Adam Simon, to advance the current draft of the intergovernmental agreement with D36, and also recognizing the council for D36 and its staff. They also were fantastic to try and help advance some of the key issues that have been raised by the Park District Board, notably Section 22. I know, Adam, you put quite a bit of time into that piece of the puzzle. I don't know if you want to provide some content or context as to some of the changes you made or any other elements of this agreement.
You know, we got some really valuable feedback from the board at the last meeting, and we incorporated those changes into the agreement, and the school district accepted them. So we added an additional separate reverter for the gymnasium property. We added a reciprocal hold harmless for the playground property after it's conveyed. Those were really the two highlights. I think the rest of it was clarification. We identified each of the parcels by how big they are, we named them specifically so there's more clarification. But the feedback we got from the board was incorporated and the school district accepted it, and otherwise the agreement is in the same form you've seen it before.
So it's presented tonight with the idea of approving it on the 21st during our regular board meeting.
The school board has a meeting on September 12th where it will be presented to the school board for their approval.
I just wanted to add one thing, if I might. There was a conflict of interest lodged at the last meeting of August 17th. It named me specifically as possessing a conflict of interest because I serve as a substitute teacher in District 36. Adam Simon, our legal counsel, reviewed that allegation. He has a 3-page memo addressing and finding, in fact, there is no conflict. That said, I won't seek, nor will I accept any substitute teaching assignments in District 36 this year. However, for those of you who are good citizens of Winnetka, if you want to step forward, they're always desperate for substitute teachers. Thanks, Adam, for reviewing it. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Christina. Warren?
I just would prefer to utilize the exact square footages that come from the survey. For the playground parcel, that's 26,276 square feet. And for the gymnasium parcel, that's 8,280 square feet.
Thank you.
You can find those on the survey document, which references an exhibit.
Thank you, Warren. Any other comments by commissioners? Commissioner Rood?
Specifically, and this goes to our counselor, as I read through the new, the intergovernmental agreement to transfer real property, it seemed that we somehow had conflated what was the original intent, and that was a unanimous agreement by the board to provide the gymnasium parcel, as it's now called, the 8,280 square feet, as a gift to D36 in return for having access infinitum to the D36 gymnasium, and I see now it includes also the classrooms. And we got a unanimous vote on that. And I could get my arms around that because there was value that was coming back to the Winnetka Park District in the ability to have access forever, as long as that parcel was the school district. As I read this transfer agreement, it seems we have now conflated the two parcels. We have conflated the gymnasium parcel now with what is called the playground parcel. And I thought it was our intention as a board that we were going to separate those. And again, we have not formally voted. We will do that, I understand, as of the September board meeting on this, which is unfortunate because there is an issue in the caucus survey which might be responsive to how we move forward with this, asking specifically about what happens to Park District land. That's why I asked Susan if she had an idea of when we would have that data back. Because I think it would be very helpful to have that data to know where the community stood as a whole on the gifting of open space land. But if I was looking at this, the one change I might suggest, Mr. Simon, is that I would specifically carve out the gym part and say that is what we agreed would be the gift for purposes of access to the gym. I assume that the vote will pass, but I don't know that because commissioners don't know how they'll vote until the actual time. So I'd like to see the document cleaned up a bit there. I also had a problem with the language that is, hold on here, I'll find it, section 22. I appreciate very much the addition of that language, but I was confused by it because there seems to be a conflict between the language of the intergovernmental agreement for shared use of facilities that Kyle Berg worked so hard on. As I understand the term of that agreement, it is a 5-year term. And then this agreement, what I'd like to see, if you agree, Counselor, if the board so agrees, that in the event of any conflict between these two intergovernmental agreements, there is no question that the property transfer agreement will take precedent. So as long as the school has the playground, should that pass, that we, the Park District, will have access to the facilities, the D36 facilities at Crow Island, so that there's never any confusion of that. And then finally, I will again express my grave concern that we continue to give away this land. I understand that, you know, the theory being, well, it'll stay the same, it's a playground. We can't foresee what will happen in future years. We just don't know. And the comment the president of the school board made that, well, Crow Island is, you know, on the National Register of Historic Places. That is true. But National Register of Historic Places in time can be demolished. It does happen. That's not a guarantee. It's sad because I went back and I did some history lessons here. And I wanted to know if the Park District that was formed in 1904 had actually conveyed the land to D36 when construction started on the Crow Island School in, I think, 1937. And of course, you know the answer to this because you've done the title research. So I did a little digging, and what I found was no. Whatever the predecessor of D36 went out and purchased the land on which to construct the Crow Island School. It is, to me, the philosophy of this community historically has been to place great value on preservation of our natural resources and making sure we preserve our open spaces, to the point that Charles Peck had a condition that the Village Green would never, ever, ever have a structure on it. And to this day, there is no building on the Village Green because of that desire. Edward Bennett, when he did the first plan of this village back in 1921, was focused on the preservation of natural resources. So this has been a common theme. We're a park district, and I can see absolutely no reason that we need to make this gift, and I see extreme conflict in our process where we would charge the library board, make them pay for Library Park, and yet we are so willing to give away a parcel that, in my opinion, is probably of a greater monetary value. Of course, we don't know that. And so I will conclude my comments. I will conclude. But I think this issue sets such terrible precedent that it is critical that we carefully, as commissioners, consider what we are doing. I'm also concerned that we may be in violation or have a challenge that we are in violation of Illinois law. And if that is so, the last thing this commissioner wants to see is another lawsuit. Thank you for your cooperation and patience with my comments.
Thank you, Commissioner Root. Christina, you have a comment?
Can I just respond to some of the legal issues?
Please, let's go to Adam, then we'll come to Christina.
In regard to the construction or structure of the agreement,
Mhm.
I believe it represents the direction I received from the consensus of the board. In regard to the shared use of the Crow Island School, first and foremost, the agreement guarantees the Park District the shared use of the indoor facilities at Crow Island School for as long as they continue to use the gymnasium parcel or the playground parcel. So that's minimum. At any time there exists a shared use agreement that applies generally between the two districts, that will define the terms of our use of the indoor facility. In any time that agreement expires or doesn't exist, it defaults back to the fact that we get to use their facilities, and we will negotiate in good faith to set clear terms and conditions of that. But again, the minimum guarantee is that we will have the use of the indoor facilities at Crow Island School for as long as they use the gymnasium parcel and or the playground parcel. And for administrative convenience, if there's a shared use agreement, the terms and conditions that apply to every other property will also apply here.
Thank you, Adam. Christina?
Yeah, the only comment I wanted to make is it's not a gift, it's a trade. And it's a trade because we have no gyms and we have no indoor space. And so when we need to do programming that involves gyms or indoor space, especially in the summer if there's inclement weather, it is very beneficial to us to have a place to go. And we don't have it. So rather than building or trying to build our own, it's better to share it in their off season. And that has a value. That has a true monetary value. It has a value that we couldn't possibly capture in any other way. We couldn't build it, so to share it is rational between two taxing bodies, and to use it for programming is at a convenient location is optimal for both of us.
Can I jump in there?
Yep.
So, Colleen, there was a purposeful recognition that we still had the intergovernmental agreement to define what we would secure in the way of use of Crow Island School as we put the shared use document together. So we'll do what is necessary, if anything, to the shared use agreement, recognizing what Adam has already stated. To Christina's point, Kyle and I worked on the estimated revenues on an annual basis for programming with Crow Island School. We believe it's $110,000 gross, about $40,000 net on an annual basis for use of the gymnasium and the classrooms at Crow Island School. So that's, to Christina's point, it's meaningful for the Park District to have access to a facility for a whole host of programming throughout the year.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Commissioner James?
I go back to answer some questions and make a few comments on the larger principles. The number one plank for many years running, the caucus, is intergovernmental cooperation. The Park District has sought to cooperate and has a tremendous relationship going back decades with District 36. We have many shared use facilities, but contrary to comments that were made earlier, there are no agreements. There are certainly comments, there are minutes, but neither D36 nor the Park District was able to find a written agreement between the parties that described the use of the playground, the first grade playground at Crow Island. That also coincided with the lack of documentation on the ongoing exchange of facilities and services that has developed over decades. And that references Kyle Berg and John Peterson and other staff members' work, including many from D36, to put this all together in one omnibus agreement. It was only during that process that we determined that the first grade playground exceeded into our, recognized that the first grade playground is on Crow Island property without an agreement in writing. So there's no change in land use. There's no diminution in open space. The first grade playground will remain exactly as it is. However, D36 is putting a fence around the property in keeping with the recommendations for the security. We were also faced with the choice of D36. They came to us and said, we can put the gym further east and it'll compromise the integrity of the original architectural plan of Crow Island, or we can keep the center line, but to do so, we need 8,000 feet of your property. And we cooperated and said, if the gym's gonna be here or here, we support the use of the gym. We understand the efficacy of putting it here. That's how that came about. In addition to that conversation, there was the preceding conversation of cooperation regarding the stormwater. And D36, Village of Winnetka, and the Winnetka Park District, long ago entered into an intergovernmental agreement regarding stormwater. The path and the actual physical capacity of the stormwater, because of Cook County regulations, the D36 was in the catch-22. They could either build the building or they could build the storm trap, but they couldn't do both. They didn't have enough room. They came to us, and we said, of course, the conveyance is going to run across Crow Island Woods. It was optimized, and Chris Rintz worked very hard to make sure it minimized the impact on Crow Island Woods. And he was able to secure additional funding to acquire 1205 Sunset, the Crone property, which was recognized recently by the village. So the Crone property's been acquired by the village. It's contiguous to Crow Island Woods. It's 1.05 acres, and it will effectively become additional open space once the storm water is routed through there. This is a great example of the village, Park District, and District 36 working together to solve a problem for the community that in the end will net additional open space. So to the comments of loss of open space, we're actually picking up an additional 1.05 acres of open space contiguous to Crow Island Woods, though we're giving up 3/4 of an acre, 8,000 square feet, or 1/5 of an acre for the gymnasium parcel. The land use of the playground doesn't change. So I'm pleased with the outcome. We did vote in August to move forward with this agreement, so the transaction has been approved by this board. It's the actual wording of how it's to be conveyed that should be voted on in September, and that's what Adam is working on. Thank you.
Commissioner Rue?
Commissioner James, have we a commitment from the village, or Madam President, do we now have a commitment from the village that they will convey the Crone property to the Winnetka Park District?
No, there's no commitment. It was discussed in the past. It remains there will be open space. And in prior conversations with President Rintz, he said they'd convey it to the Park District. That's not been codified. The point is land use and open space will be increased by intergovernmental cooperation.
Again, before we start conflating property that is owned or will be owned by the village of Winnetka.
It is owned.
With property that is owned by the Winnetka Park District, I think it's very important that we find out if the village is indeed, before we start making these analogies, I think we need some clarity on that and some finality that the Crone property is coming to the Park District. Secondly, when you look at what happens through time, if you recall back in 2019, D36 was thinking about getting rid of the neighborhood elementary schools and consolidating in a new structure. So that the fact that this is now a school, it may not always be a school. And there may be repurposing of that building someday. So what is now open space may not stay open space. Again, we are setting a precedent that is somewhat interesting here. I have no problem at all with the 8,280 square feet that is needed for purposes of a gymnasium. I understand that. That's intergovernmental cooperation. I thought that's what we were doing.
Christina?
I think that the trade that we've described, which is the parcel for the gym and the parcel for the playground in exchange for use in perpetuity, stands on its own. I think that the eventual conveyance or the preservation of open space of the Crone property is icing on the cake, but they do not need to be connected. That is adding too many layers to this equation. This equation stands on its own. It benefits us to an enormous degree. We have always struggled with our footprint. We have always struggled with where to go in inclement weather with our camps in the summertime when they have downtime and they have space. So I think this transaction stands on its own, and I think it makes great sense for us. I think if the Crone property gets conveyed, that's a huge win for us. It's our understanding that it could happen. I'm not willing to delay this or delay the school in the execution of this.
I wouldn't suggest that. I just don't like us making some sort of representations when we don't know what the village plans to do.
Yeah, I think the context is useful, but I also think that the trade stands on its own. And to me, it is a very attractive trade for us.
We don't know if the village is going to convey that property. We do know that the village has acquired that property for the purpose of the stormwater conveyance, and that it will be open space after that.
Thank you.
I have one more.
Oh, Commissioner Rapp, sorry.
Yes, I just have a few comments and questions. One, I mean, I do regret that we did not seriously explore the license arrangement in exchange for the gym, because then we would at least have retained the underlying property. So I do think that that is unfortunate that that option was not fully explored, discussed, vetted, pros and cons by the board. Second, I believe that there was a request to include the deed/title language that would appear in the agreement, and I didn't see that. I'm not a property person, but it still seems a little bit open as to when a new title search is done on this property, whether it's consolidated or not, what language is actually going to come up and appear.
For the reversion
For the
rates.
reverter clause. The other thing that Adam, I would like a little bit more of a view of clarity on is in response to the public comments with respect to our policy manual and which code is the appropriate one for this transaction. Because I was not clued into the fact that our policy manual does, specifically reference the Park District Code. So it'd be good if you could comment on that a little further.
Thank you. Mr. Simon, anything you'd add? If not, we can follow up.
I don't remember this section. Manual was referencing public comment.
The one that Chris Reese's
It's the entire context of that section says, the board of the park may from time to time decide to sell, lease, or liquidate certain assets that it has accumulated, including real estate, buildings, equipment, and other tangible items. So it recognizes that the park district might convey title to real or personal property. In regards to real estate, the park code sets forth limitations and procedures governing the sale or lease of real estate and shall be strictly adhered to in all instances. So I read that to say that where we are relying upon the Park District Code to exercise authority to sell land, then we have to strictly comply with the Park District Code. We are not relying upon the Park District Code in this case, so it's inapplicable. We are relying upon the Local Government Property Transfer Act, and this does not prevent, the manual does not prevent us from exercising that authority.
And then what about adding the deed language in the agreement?
So the reverter language will be in the body of the deed, and I'll attempt to prepare a draft deed for the next meeting.
Anybody else? Let's move along in unfinished business to item 6.2, the Winnetka Golf Club and the specific bridge handrail proposal. Costa?
Mayor, thank you. As discussed at the August 17, 2023 meeting, the Kemper team, Vince and his or staff, did bring to the attention of the board the issues that we had with the current contractor on the project that did give a proposal for a handrails to be added to the existing bridges that are now built on the course. That proposal, unfortunately, the original cost for that did go up from the bridge guy's proposal. Unfortunately, his original math was incorrect. He only accounted for one half of the bridges in his materials list, so he came back with a proposal of $41,300. At that point in time, along with some other issues that we were ongoing with the project, the choice was made to decline the proposal from the bridge guy and to continue searching for new proposals to execute this work. We went through one of our construction companies that we utilize a fair bit, Bear Construction. We brought them on site to review the proposed work. They came back with a proposal to complete the project under the JOC program for $36,683.54. Prior to that, the Kemper team did receive two other proposals. Both were higher. One was in the mid-$40,000 range, and the other one, if memory serves, was in the mid-$90,000 range to execute on the handrail work. At this point in time, after reviewing that, we're doing the selection of materials, which is going to be sourced from the same supplier as the bridge materials themselves. So the wood will be sourced from the same mill, which will give more of a cohesive look throughout. The park district staff, along with Kemper, are supporting the efforts to move forward with the proposal from Bear Construction to erect the handrails on the bridges identified for $36,683.54. No action to be taken tonight, since this is committee, but we will be looking to have action taken on the 21st to have these constructed still this fall of this year. So October is when we're anticipating construction, mid-October to start, and they are anticipating about a month to construct the handrails. At this point in time, once again, no action is taken, but I'd love to be able to answer any questions that the board might have on this issue.
Sounds pretty straightforward.
Yep.
Thanks.
Thank you, Costa. Item 6.3, Elder Lane Beach. We have 3 items to discuss here tonight. One is change orders. Second is plan to move forward to open Elder Lane Beach. And number 3 is Elder Lane Centennial Breakwater Project Study Session. So starting with number 1, change orders. Costa, we'll keep you on the spot.
Sounds good here. Thank you again. As reviewed and as discussed at the August Park Board meeting, there was additional work discussed with our team of experts, our design team, to move forward with additional work in response to questions and concerns that we heard from the Park District Board, along with questions and concerns that we've heard or actions taken by the village with the ordinances that were passed, ordinances on the lakefront. With that being said, we did go back to our consultant team of Red Barn and Lakota. Lakota in turn has worked with their sub-consultants, Spaceco and Burke as well, to put together 2 proposals. I'll say 3 because we included the Spaceco proposal so you can see the differential charges from the original scope to the existing scope. The first proposal to review would be from Matt Wright for Red Barn Design and Engineering. The change order request, as it's being proposed for the scope of work, is taking into consideration the existing pier and to complete a condition assessment report on the pier so we can better understand the actual integrity of the pier, what can be done with the pier from a design standpoint, how is the stormwater integrated through that, and then better understand our abilities and what repairs would be needed for that pier. With that taken into consideration and the additional meetings outlined in the scope of work, extra services are identified through their hourly rate as needed for additional meetings beyond those identified in the report. Matt did bring a proposal back for the total cost of $250. This would be an additional scope of work of services beyond his current contract, so that's why you're seeing this in the form of a change order. I'd like to tackle these one at a time as we discuss through the board, and then look at the total amount as it was suggested from the park board and approved to take the $120,000 from hard costs, construction costs, to move them and transfer them into soft costs. We're well under that amount, but I just want to take these through one at a time to be able to answer. Matt is here tonight with us, so he would also be able to answer the questions that you might have on this matter as well. So before we move on to Lakota, are there any questions as it relates to Matt Wright's scope of work? The additional change order for the scope of work, I should say.
Just, so, we have the plans from 1947, correct? Like, those are the latest ones for the pier? There aren't
The
more recent
original
ones?
design plans for the original build, yes.
Okay, and so it's updating, like comparing those plans to what has deteriorated since then, and then recommending several concepts for us to consider in terms of repairing the pier?
So this plan here, the scope of work identified, is going to basically wrap from that as a condition assessment report that will go through, and there will be a report received from Matt on his findings and review of that, not only the addition of the original build of the pier, but also there was secondary work done to that. There was a cap put on and an extension of the steel at the end, looking at the integrity of those structures, what can be done to remedy those in the exercise to move forward with sustaining the pier as will be proposed here, shown in our later tonight, and our efforts on how to address that. We will come up with a report that will identify the current conditions, the areas of conditions or concerns that need to repair, a recommendation on how to repair that, and then engagement with that with the village, because this is a joint effort. The pier is owned by the Park District, but the stormwater conveyance underneath is owned by the village of Winnetka. So we want to make sure after the condition assessment report has been completed, we can now then take that information, engage with the village, understand what their future thoughts are on the pier and how we would move forward to correct what repairs would be needed, and then work together in collaboration, come up with a design. Not only that would meet the artistic design, the architectural design, I should say, from the Lakota team, but how to educate or how to put that into actual real world and make that into something functional. So that's initial. Once we land on that concept, I will note, as it's noted in the draft summary to the board for the memo, there will be an additional scope of work depending on the severity of that work. So if we come up with something that's very lavish and takes a lot more design work for the construction documents to be made, at that point in time, there will be potentially another change order. I can't tell you the magnitude of that without understanding the design detail, but that would be something that could come out along later in addition to. But our first step was to do an assessment report, contact the village, make sure that we're both on the same page with what our design would be, and then we could facilitate that design after that. Matt, is there anything to add to that, or?
Nope, you nailed it. Well done.
Thank you. Costa?
Cynthia, was that the only question?
Commissioner Rip, sorry.
Yeah, I just have a question. In looking at Matt's new cost components, I see he has $160,000 as being the cost to, I thought, repair, let's see here, concrete pier improvements, east end restore and repair. So I guess that number is one that is just a very early estimate. Do you understand that?
It's based on square footage on the proposed plan that you'll see as the next board item here, 6.3.2. That's based off of that initial design from Lakota on the square footage understanding only. And once again, just have a placeholder to keep the cost estimates as real and as up to date as possible.
Okay, so very preliminary and it will change. Thank you.
Potentially, yes. Yes.
Any other questions from commissioners? Great. Item 6.32, plan to move forward.
Hold on a second. That was one.
Wait,
I apologize. Moving on to additional scopes of work. Sorry about that, Eric. There was a proposal submitted by the Lakota group as well. I I will note the submittal from the Lakota group also entails a submittal change order from the Spaceco team and from the Burke team. The the Lakota group submittal is identified, as we've been talking for some time now. This is taking into consideration attendance and working sessions with board and staff. Once again, we've exhausted all those already from the initial scope with a lot of the design changes and a lot of the inquiries for that. Development and the refined preliminary or plan direction, cost estimate support to the design when things are finalized, team design and coordination, and then, of course, the caveat here, the development of the 3D Elder Lane bluff mass modeling, which will be the bedrock that we'll use to build over the last piece, which is the Lumium renderings that have been asked and requested by this board for some time. Now that we're getting to a point where we have what staff feels is almost the final design, we want to start Lakota working on the base work for what that looks like, so we can bring those illustrations back to the board and to the public to better show and then represent the impact that the site's going to have, and show the heights of these stone breakwaters, piers, everything else, just how low those are and how they are not cutting across the vistas and they're not as impactful as a lot of people have suggested. The direction given to staff and to the team was to try to reduce that as much as possible, taking into consideration what we've heard through the open houses, and to further that. So the additional work identified in there for the budget for the Lakota work and additional scope is $28,000 with a reimbursable expense estimate currently at $1,200. So that would be for the Lakota scope of work as discussed at the last meeting for additional services. And then from there, I can further go through the Spaceco work, but are there any questions in regards to Lakota's proposal?
Commissioner Root?
I just have a question. Scott's here. Hi, Scott. Do we have a master service agreement with Lakota? Do we have a general contract with Lakota?
We do. That was the one that was approved at the same time with Matt for, I forget the total, was 300 and some odd thousand from the services of Lakota, Spaceco, and Burke.
Well, one of the things I'd like to see, and Mr. Ferris, I'll speak also to you, we've had a great deal of difficulty getting information from past Lakota services. One being getting survey data. So I just want to make sure that when we have a contract with you, that this information belongs to the Park District. And if we have a resident who wants information and wants to FOIA something, that you provide information to the Park District, it stays in Park District files, so that we don't ever end up in this situation where we can't find things. That's why I asked about a master service agreement, because we've had a long-term rich relationship since what, Scott, 2015?
Probably before that, actually.
Yeah, probably before that.
Yeah.
So.
And you should have all the information that we've ever provided. It's always been in all of our contracts, all the information, all the original content belongs to the Park District. Same with the Village of Winnetka.
Interesting, that never could find the customer data from the 2030 plan. Never could find it. And I don't know, maybe a subcontractor has that of yours, Scott. Thank you.
Any other questions related to the proposal being presented tonight?
I had a question just with the Spaceco and Burke.
I'm going to go into that next. I was talking just in regard to the Lakota right now.
Okay, just when you get to it.
I'm going to describe the services and how they've transferred from the original agreement and the ones that are being credited back and the new based on the work scope that's being identified.
Okay.
I'll go through all that.
Okay.
So moving on to the Spaceco Engineering Services Change Order 1 as presented. Once again, as described previously and with the work product and the intent to move forward with a plan for Elder Lane and Centennial Park. The scope of service as identified in the memorandum to Scott and myself, so dated September 7, 2023. There are 9 tasks that are identified through the fee structure for Spaceco and Christopher Burke Engineering Group. The fee structure and tasks are identified 1 through 9. it's broken down into 3 categories, just to help with a point of clarity. If you look on page, I believe it's page 4, yes, page 4 of the memorandum, you'll see at the bottom of that page a small chart that's broken down to a fee structure, shows the original amount, the change order amount, and then the adjusted total. The reason I had Bill Loftus adjusted this way was to better understand what we are actually completing tonight as far as the change order, which we're requesting of $27,200. But this shows the overall cost for contract from the original scope, what was changed and taken out, because there was development for engineering work for the access road on the north side and some other elements that have been removed from the design. Some of those design fees will be transferred into new work to help support the new access road or the existing access road and widening it, and the support that's needed upland of that for retaining and so forth. So there are certain fees that have come back as a credit, if you will, are identified as a change order, and then the adjusted total amount. So with that being said, the first task is for construction documents. The original was $7,800. The change order, they are proposing an additional $22,200. The reason for that is some of that work with the parking lot and other things, we took into another level of description for the parking lot through the designs for that to address issues with the drainage of the parking lot, curb and gutter, and to put that back the way it needs to be. So that was an additional $22,200, along with some other construction document fees. Schematic electrical design, original was not $6,500. There's no change to that, so that stays status quo. The meeting schedule is $9,800 for the access road wall, which once again, the adjusted total, there's no change to that. The retaining road for the access road along the preliminary, the original amount was $800 or $8,000. Change order amount for that is an additional $7,000. So that is the existing preliminary, or excuse me, the access road for the drive down, for the preliminary of what that is, for what that was entailed. So the road itself for access. There's an up fee in there. And then task number 5, there was an additional $11,400 identified for the retaining along the road for the final design on what that would be to get that all completed. The stairs, there was an addition of $5,700, once again, based on the design changes from the removal of other components, trying to get that fit or finished out. And then overall meetings for tasks on the overall side, there is a $3,500 addition there. The bluff retaining wall is being reduced from the original contract, was right back to $20,800. And then the final outlet structure and structure sizes, once again, with where we're at, the stormwater portion of that gets credit back. So the net change for what's being requested from Spaceco is $27,200 for this change order. There is still additional service from the original contract remaining of $89,100, which shows the adjusted total being $116,300. Cynthia, does that help some of the explanation?
Can't spread the numbers.
Sure.
In the original agreement, we had Spaceco for $27,000 for professional fees. We had Christopher Burke for $100,000. Then we had professional fees for Centennial, Spaceco at $10,000. Is this just for Elder, or is it for Centennial too? Like,
This, what you're seeing here is for Centennial, or excuse me, is for Elder, not Centennial.
So we have-
Centennial scope in the original contract stays the same.
Okay, so we had $127,000 between Spaceco and Burke. And this says the original was $89,100.
Don't forget, there was additional piece that was contracted for stormwater independent of the piece that went through the
That's separate,
code group. correct?
that's separate from this 100,000.
So, I don't have the contract in front of me
Yeah,
to verify.
okay.
This is not getting approved this evening.
Okay.
I did respond back to an email with you.
Yeah, no,
If we wanted to engage on Wednesday and go through this along with that, I'd be glad to answer any
Okay,
questions.
no, that would be good.
But the request is $27,200 as the change order, which brings the total request for all 3 scopes of services through 3 different vendors to $73,450. That goes up with the $1,200 for the reimbursement to $74,650. The amount that was requested from the previous board meeting was $120,000. This is coming in $46,550 below that amount. But we would be looking for a recommendation at the board meeting to approve that. Are there any other questions?
Thank you, Costa. Now we're ready to move to the second item. The plan to move forward to open Alderlane Beach. Costa, I'll turn it back to you.
Sounds great. All right, Eric, thank you so much. This evening, the staff and the representatives from the design team have came forward with conceptual design here, once again, in the phased implementation to identify things that we've heard and where things are tracking currently with the plan. As discussed before, the base elements of the plan stay the same. Phase 1, as it's shown here for Centennial, essentially stays the same. There is a note here of exposed shading that's a current timber wall that has been identified as part of the cost total, but that is now part of that scope of work. That's something we folded back into the project. The other note that I will make is previously the ADA walkway going down was identified originally in the cost estimates as or asphalt or blacktop, if you will. We went ahead and made the change to make sure that it's concrete as part of this. If the board has an appetite to look as an opportunity to raise that up, the design team with Lakota here, we can look at what that might be, similar to what things were done at Tower, but that would have to be a direction coming from the board for a clear direction to move forward on that piece. To the north, one thing that we've heard throughout is that currently the village is in the mindset that the stormwater is in good working order, and they've had an opportunity to review that, and they're looking to keep status quo on the stormwater. So that's why the inclusion of the pier is back in. You will notice that at the end of the pier, the steel grating has been removed, and currently it's shown with a 16 foot by 16 foot end section at the end of the pier, which would go out the same distance as the current steel, but it would be widened by additional, what was it, 2 feet 3?
2 foot 9.
2 foot 9 on each side to 16 feet to have an area for lounging or access. This plan is, it's hard to see here, but there's also hand railings identified and shown to be installed as part of that improvement. The north structure breakwater has changed a little bit in design. Previously, it was a curved structure that hooked to the right. Once again, to try to be mindful of dollars and where things are at, that structure has been straightened out to a perpendicular structure. The distance offshore stays the same, but we did include the integration of the infrastructure of the two 36-inch pipes and the manhole to the west abutting the breakwater, or excuse me, the break wall for future opportunities if the village so chooses after the study session to move forward with relocation of the stormwater pipe to the proposed plan that we had completed previously. This would allow for that transition without a large cost increase to dismantle the breakwater and reconstruct it with the new infrastructure built into that. The cost differential for that, Matt, I'm not sure if you have that off the top, was $286,000 was identified for that cost in the cost estimate. The structure or manhole 4 was in there as well. That total was $180,000. So $466,000 for that improvement as money to be potentially spent for future development of what could be a great opportunity to convey water along with the water quality structures as we previously identified. You'll see a small change here where the natural stone steps across the breakwater. Those were pulled back to the west a little bit to allow for a smooth transition into the top of the boardwalk, as well as access down to the beach. So a beachgoer to the north would be able to walk up over the breakwater, continue either on the boardwalk or continue down to the beach, and be able to keep moving through the system. The pier elevation stays the same as it was before, barring any improvements or design changes that come through with the assessment and the report of how to repair that, but currently that element stays in. The removal of the steel that bifurcates that north beach is still being proposed to be removed, and the concrete portions that were down there before from the wrapping have already been removed, so those have been removed off the plan. The access on the boardwalk will stay the full width, once again anticipating the future design for the village to access that accordingly with their equipment if manhole 4 in the drainage, stormwater drain does go to the north. The access are ramp down, the 88 ramp to the beach stays in place and stays the same. The other design change that, well, I'll leave it at this. There aren't any other design changes as shown at Centennial. Once again, letter J, parking lot repairs and resurfacing, repair and replace of the drainage structure as required. Once again, reviewing the entire parking lot, doing any curb and gutter where needed, addressing any drainage issues there, and then reconnecting to the existing outfall. Those are the majority of the improvements or changes to Centennial. And like I said, essentially for Elder, as it's proposed in this initial step, just the stone area, or excuse me, the steel sheeting to the north that was identified in later phases. We moved that up into phase 1, and then the concrete improvement versus the asphalt. Before I move on to phase 2, are there any concerns or questions that you'd like to answer?
You identified $286,000 to put in place the infrastructure in the event that the village decides to move their stormwater discharge pipe.
Correct.
Which I think is rational and accommodating and good partnership. What was the $188,000 for?
That would be the manhole 4 structure that would be on the farthest west side of that structure, abutting the current steel infrastructure.
Got it.
To have both of those components included. The bore pit and the other components that would go down there are not included at this time. Once again, that doesn't get addressed until the work is done.
Yeah.
So that's significant. It's line 61 and 62 on the cost estimate.
Thanks. I don't have the list of costs here.
Apologize. It's on the website.
Thank you.
Cost of the existing Elder Pier elevation is just below 585.
Correct.
Is that right?
That is correct.
And the existing Elder Beach House, that's about 588.
588 point, yes. Yeah, right under 589.
Okay, so closer to 589, so just under 589, just under 585.
Right.
So we got a 4-foot grade differential between the boardwalk as shown in the pier. So what's not shown on here is that we probably have to have steps down there. We'd have steps from the pier, from the boardwalk level down to the pier level.
Correct. So right now, the way to access the pier, you would have to go down the ramp and get access to the north-south of the Elder Beach, and then be able to walk because the gradient of the beach would be the same. So yeah, you would have to walk to gain access to that. As we've discussed internally with the design team, that's a design detail that will come out into the final design, and we'll make sure that that's incorporated.
But the elevation of the boardwalk is right around 589, and that's the height of the existing steel at Elder and Centennial, the Elder Boathouse. The height of the Elder Pier is 585, 4 feet lower.
Correct.
And the height of the North Groin is?
The North Groin at the end is 585.
And the South Groin?
The South Groin is 583, I believe, is where we landed that one. Matt, is
On
that
the east end.
yeah, it's
And-
583 here.
Right up to
182.
585.
Right. So there's a 2-foot drop over the South Groin, 585 here, which is the same height of the existing pier, dropping 2 feet to the outer end, 2 feet lower than the existing pier. This end here is 585, equal to the end of the pier, and that wraps up to 587, if I'm not mistaken, when that tightens back in.
Correct.
So 2-foot rises on both. Once again, being able to see over each structure from the pier or any other element that's on there. And then, you know, somebody of 6-foot stature so should be able to see over both of those elements when they're on the beach.
Okay.
About some of 14 stature.
It would be closer, but that's where the renderings, once that gets approved, will help illustrate that and show, and we can put finer details to that.
Thank you.
This is really a question for Matt. I'm looking at this and I'm seeing a whole lot of concrete, and we're gonna be driving in a whole lot of steel. And my question is, I don't see much sand. So, first question, if the pier is going to stay, why do we need to build this breakwater A? And at this point, that's my question. Because once I assume the pier is gonna serve to trap sand.
Correct.
And the groins that exist right now, I believe they also
The
serve to
the
trap
pier's purpose
sand.
isn't to trap sand, it's a porous structure. The purpose of the pier is to convey the stormwater pipe, period.
Well, I understand that, but it does trap, I'm looking at this and I'm seeing a whole lot of concrete and stone and steel dumped in a beach that's not very large. Elder is not it's what, 430 feet? Warren, how many feet are we talking about?
Let me answer that question if I can.
Sure.
Elder, from the north end of Elder to the south end of Centennial is 1,000 feet. It's the biggest potential contiguous beach in all Winnetka.
Warren, we know that. I'm asking about
Elder-
Elder because we don't have this is our problem.
Allow me to
We don't
answer.
have the
Please
continuous
Please
beach.
allow me to answer.
No, I asked the
Please-
question and you're not
Please allow
answering.
me to answer. Elder's 410 feet.
Thank you.
The existing steel groin is 110 feet south of the north property line. The area north of that doesn't get used. It was underwater. There's steel north of it where, back in the high water, there was nothing. There was waves breaking against the steel. So most people perceive that the north end of the beach is the existing steel. By removing that steel and replacing it with the stone groin, we recapture 110 feet of our property that we're currently not utilizing. So that's a huge beach. So 410 feet from the north to the existing steel in the south. Contrast that to Maple, 260 feet. Contrast that to Tower, which is 520. So that's almost as big as Tower. It's a substantial beach. These images, you really got to get down to the beach to understand the scale. It's way bigger than anything we
Can I ask you
have.
one other question? How much of the beach is going to be taken up by the stone breakwater as far as horizontal beach?
Much of that is below water level and it's going to capture sand. We have to respect the property line on the north. I believe, Matt, that's what's.
From toe to toe, that structure is about 80 feet.
Toe to toe, it's 80 feet.
Of
So
which-
half of that, 40 feet. So,
So on the south side, approximately half of that 40 feet will be buried
yeah,
in sand.
yeah.
And again, what assurance do we have? I understand Mr. Edwardson's gonna have nice sand accretion with the construction of this breakwater. My question is, what assurance do we have that this is gonna work to actually retain sand on Elder?
The structure as it's designed here it's going to retain as much sand as it can through here, and it's going to help sand retention during the northeast storms, but without the curvature and not bringing that back in, Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, sand retention is going to be based on water conditions, but you're going to break the energy and you're going to have a calm swimming environment and cell is what that's striving
And
towards.
without any offshore structure to break up around the east wave, the sand's gonna come and go north and south, but to maintain a beach that you'll probably desirably require annual or biannual nourishment.
And we're gonna cost out how much that's going to be also?
Ultimately, once we actually design something.
Keep in mind that these design changes are responsive to the village's ordinance. the village adopted lakefront ordinances which require minimal height, maximum views. So we understand here that there's a trade-off between the height of the stone and the sand retention. The lower the stone, the higher the probability that a major storm event's can wash out the stone. We're being responsive to the village ordinance by lowering the stone groin, removing the curve, so that it's a simple, straight groin. It replaces the steel groin that's 110 feet south of our property line, so we're recapturing that beach. We're gonna dissipate more wave energy through the use of stone versus steel, so we don't get that reflected wave energy. The pier is the pier. We'd like, in the original plan, we'd like to remove it and have 400 feet of contiguous beach. But we leave it for now. We make provisions for a future stormwater relocation because it's very prudent to make that accommodation now because it's far more expensive later.
So your trade-off, I just want to make one comment because it's not only the village ordinances, but also the comments of people who came to all of our open houses that said lower the breakwaters because we want vistas. So the trade-off is the lower the breakwater, the less protection you get. You get some protection, but you don't get optimal protection unless you have a super high breakwater, and the super high breakwater, it prevents the vistas. So it's responsive to the comments that we heard from citizens who said, lower them as much as you can to preserve the vistas.
For comparison purposes,
perspective,
for perspective, the Maple Pier is 235 feet long, right? So this is 211, the stone groin, 219 to the north. So that north groin is shorter than the Maple Pier.
I've heard that, I've heard the words, and I'm frustrated, disappointed that we do not have numbers to quantify those impacts. Like, what level of protection do we get at this height? How much sand do we need to use to replenish this? Like,
So I think Matt just identified that that's something that comes down the road when he has finalized the design pieces,
Yeah.
then he can tell us.
I got some lines on paper. Two things. One, these breakwaters intention, there's no protection. Shore protection is provided by the steel bulkhead. The breakwater is the only purpose of them is to hold sand. And the north one is to hold sand and convey the stormwater pipes. Period.
It's a fundamental change from Lloyd. Lloyd, the bluff protection is afforded by the headland beach system. The wave energy is dissipated by the stone and the height of the stone and the boat launch itself. Here, we're relying upon the steel bulkhead to protect the bluff, much like what was established at Centennial and Elder in 1987. We're just continuing that, and we're lowering the stone groins to preserve the vistas, recognizing we'll have less usable beach.
Doesn't that beg the question, though, as long as the pier is there, that perhaps there needs to be kind of an incremental phase-in where we don't necessarily need a breakwater? I'm looking at this and it's just all these structures, and I'm looking at the little nubby, I guess you call it A also, here on the Elder southern boundary. And I'm trying to figure out, why do we need, first of all, it's expensive. Secondly, it's filling in the lake.
There are no more structures than exist today.
Well, you put a lot of stone in the lake.
There are no more structures than exist today. The north structure replaces the steel that exists, and we're giving away 110 feet of potential beach. The central, the pier's the pier, the center structure is stone against the steel. Again, it's to dissipate wave energy instead of reflect it, to trap more sand. The separation
Also
between the
prevent
dogs.
the rip currents as well.
Yeah, stop rip currents. The separation between the dog beach and the people beach is a replacement of the existing steel there. It's placed in a location that affords an appropriate amount of Dog Beach was previously agreed to by board action, no less than 170, no more than 270.
And it also sets up for the next step of phase 2, which will be shown here, to take that pier and extend it and create a pier on Centennial to help divide that and have better beach retainage for the Dog Beach as well as for the swimming beach at Centennial. Can you scroll down to the
But for the retention of the pier,
Thank you.
this was all approved on May 25th.
So this element here, essentially everything that you see for Elder stays the same. There's no change to Elder. The exceptional changes here for Centennial is now the steel that was installed at this point and the stone will be repurposed and the steel will be continued through where there is a 30-foot circular end pier that is created as part of this design. That is compatible, or this is lined with stone and has a handrail on it as well to protect the structure and also address, possible future concerns. The division of the Dog Beach is now well defined. The fencing moves down to the toe of the stone to allow for a greater reduction in height to once again open views and vistas as much as possible, as we heard from the community. The boardwalk is continued to this point. Once again, the inclusion of ADA here is now allowed beyond just the staircase as it was before. So in phase 1, you would have ADA connections all the way from Sheridan Road. A person could traverse down either direction, get down to the boardwalk, but then they would be limited to this area here. This phase extends it where there is now a concrete ramp that gets ADA access down to the beach level at Centennial and now has access to the swimming site here as well. The Dog Beach is defined, the south property line, as previously shown, the fencing stays the same, and access to both sites are continuous for any walkers who would look to traverse the site throughout. The Ishbia Breakwater, which is a representation from their initial submittal, you can see their access stairs up and over. I believe with the current submittals, those have been moved further west, but until that's afforded and affirmed, we'll make sure we can update that accordingly. But once again, any beachgoer to the north or any beachgoer coming from the south could traverse the entire site across unimpeded. So once again, the two design is the extension of the pier, as we've heard before by the community and some board members. Why don't we put a pier in here, as well as the boardwalk itself being extended to the south for ADA access. Once again, trying to drive each one of those components. I'm gonna move to phase 3 real quick. Taylor, thank you so much. And then lastly, phase 3, everything that we just talked about, except the connection of the boardwalk across the 261 site. I will note the only way that phase 3 becomes viable is with acquiring the 261 property. However that might be, exchange, purchase, donation, what have you, that's the only way that phase 3 comes in is with securing the property. Now we're able to connect the two paths from Elder Centennial, have the 1,000-foot beach across, and now there's the inclusion of all that stone that we had placed before is now repurposed into an offshore breakwater that helps more sand retention here because we're leaving the steel transition in, so we don't have a pass-through of the system. We have an offshore breakwater that is connected back to shore via the existing steel, and then we'll have greater sand retention through both parcels in the site. More here to the north on the north south on Elder, south south Elder, excuse me, and more on the north south at Centennial. Matt, is there anything else in regards to design components shown in phase 3 that you would suggest?
No, you nailed it. In a nutshell.
Once again, the caveat is this does not happen without the securing of the 261 site. So that's why we've put forward our effort into phase 1, being mindful of our budget, of course, and then taking a look at what phase 2 could look like with the pier and extending that out, creating that separation of the dog to the swimming, as well as greater sand retention for the swimming as well at Centennial.
Can you go back to phase 2?
Sure. Taylor, thank you.
Yes.
Bless you.
I want to make sure that ADA access has been a primary issue from the approval of the Lakefront Master Plan in 2016. So we now have an ADA accessible path from Sheridan Road through to Centennial Park. The existing path that goes to the mid bluff is not ADA compliant. So those little retaining walls on the left, that recontours that path to make it ADA accessible. And then we get down to the boardwalk level at in an ADA accessible route. I want to make sure that that pier that's proposed is also ADA accessible. I thought we were designing it in such a way that that was a smooth transition from the path so that somebody in a wheelchair or was less ambulatory could get out and enjoy the vistas on the lake, on the pier.
That is correct. This transition is just a difference of materials that you're seeing here.
Okay.
The fencing for the dog portion comes through here and is also 10 feet to the south of the handrail that's shown on the pier itself. But yeah.
So I know there have been conversations about meeting the letter of the law with ADA accessibility. But I want everyone to understand that today, we meet ADA accessibility at Elder by virtue of a single parking space adjacent to the beach house building, and you need to call ahead and have the gate unlocked.
Correct.
And what we're aiming for is opening up Centennial, which is heretofore been fenced, gated, and locked for the past 28 years. And now we're gonna have open access for somebody at any time to go from Sheridan Road down and out onto the lake in a wheelchair in a protected environment. No key card, no call ahead.
Correct. Access to
Authentic ADA access.
from the north side of the proposed pier here, shown as letter A, to the the proposed structure on the north side. This would be all accessible.
Well, that would be if we get phase 3, but for now, phase 2 gets you out on the lake and it gets you down to the beach.
You would still have the accessible route through here, once again down to the beach.
By virtue of one parking space.
Correct.
But at Centennial, in phase 2, you get from Sheridan Road.
Correct.
Down to the boardwalk, out on the pier, or down to the beach. So you have full, true accessibility.
That is correct.
Thanks.
Can you just talk more about what these retaining walls are? I know they've been on multiple plans, but I don't really have a visual of what they.
Right now, the elements that we had identified were stacked natural stone, landing stone, or the things that you would see that are offset, in probably foot to 18-inch increments, and then offset by 4 feet. So it's a gradual step that is very smooth and seamless, as you would see a lot of the residents, or I believe, I'm trying to think if we have any other park sites, I can't think of any, but more of a natural.
It's very, very much in keeping with what I call the residential character of the community, using outcropping stone and stepping it back. It's something you see along the lake.
South facing, annuals, perennials.
Might have plants in there. There's going to be, along with this, not described, but I think it's identified as F on there, is restoration of the bluffs with natural vegetation.
Correct.
And plant communities reestablished.
Why do we need those?
The reason that we're including the terracing down here is because the grade after this point of D is too steep to be able to achieve the natural ADA grade for the slope in a single run. So we're able to cut back and contour through the earth to achieve our distance that we need at an accessible slope.
When you walk out there, you go past the drinking fountain and it begins to go downhill. There's a tableland that's higher, adjacent to 261. And then it slopes steeply down to the mid-bluff area. That's the portion, both north and south, that's way too steep for ADA access. So we have to carve into that to lengthen that, bring that pathway back up almost towards the letter D, where we start the gradual slope down. That's a minor change, but it's significant in making ADA accessibility.
Correct.
Here's what I'm envisioning. That kids, we have these walls. Are kids going to be climbing up and running and jumping from wall to wall? in that design? Like, I can't tell from this picture.
Once again, the height of the walls, they're gonna be natural stones that are about that tall, and they're gonna be probably about that wide, and then there'll be planting behind them, roughly right now, I think it's shown 4-6
If
feet.
you can imagine
And
it's
then another
terrace,
small
this
step.
high, and you go back with plantings 4 feet, and this high, you go back, it's very gradual, you hardly even notice it.
Here's what I am envisioning. At Crow Island, when I coached girls on the run, when kids were coming around the side near Santiago's garden, they would jump up and run on top of the wall right around that bend. And so, one time a girl, I mean, it was,
No, I
it was a
understand where you're
problem,
going, but
and
no.
even though it was repeatedly saying, don't do it, it's like, I just want to make sure that there is a lot of attention to that design, envisioning kids jumping from, one side to the other, or up and down, or,
Agreed.
I mean,
And
like, it
understood.
happens in other stone structures that we have.
Understood completely.
Okay.
The severity of that fall, there is no severity to that fall. The height, once again, like Scott suggested, you're up a foot, you're gonna transition back 6 feet, you're gonna go up another foot and transition back 6 feet. So it's very subtle, it's not gonna be a sheer drop with any magnitude. I didn't even think about this till I looked out the window, but there are outcropping stones along the north side of this building actually, so you can kind of see the size of what those look like. They're more done for aesthetics with a little grade change, but very similar in magnitude. Would you like to, I can show you what those look like in photographs on Wednesday.
Okay, that would be great.
Are we ready to move to item 3?
I have some more questions,
Please.
if that's appropriate. Okay, looking at Centennial with this breakwater that is 170 feet north of our boundary, why do we need this now if 205 Sheridan is going to be building, and they appear to be starting that, their own breakwater? Why do we have to have that structure?
Which structure are you asking?
You call it a pier, I call it a breakwater. I'm wondering why that's necessary, because if 205 Sheridan is going to be building their own breakwater on their boundary there, we will, if I understand correctly, have the accretion of sand. We already have quite a nice level of sand on Centennial without any of this right now. So my question is, why do we need this?
Primary purpose is separation of Dog Beach from Pupil Beach.
Fence works very well and it's a lot less expensive.
Fence will be obliterated without protection from the northeast.
So you'll see
Fences could
this.
be replaced.
You'll see the red line here, Colleen. This is
Yeah.
the existing steel on the south edge
Yeah.
of Centennial
Yeah.
property. Right here, this dotted, tan line is the existing steel that bifurcates the dog park, and then here is the the steel, and then the wood timbers that are there as well on the north side. The distance that's being created here and the pocket that's being created in this zone, once again, by building the structure out, you're giving an opportunity for people to enjoy the lake and get beyond the lake so they can see north-south the vistas. You're protecting the dog beach. You're going to create more sand to safely secure the dog beach, so the dog beach will grow in size and have a nice sized beach under high and lower water conditions. Once again, that's not a guarantee, but that's something that will accrete over time. And then on the north side, you're also creating a greater definition here where this is not a porous structure. This is something that's going to be solid. It's going to be able to retain sand through here, and you'll have that structure to have that swim zone identified through here on the north side. Once again, creating that avenue or that ability for people to go out and enjoy the pier. The armoring of that, it protects against the potential rip currents and so forth, as well as the reflective energy if that was done in steel, which is being proposed, to protect and armor that as well. So you have that ability to now, at an EDA standpoint, as Warren suggested before, not only get out to the beach, but actually got out into the water. The pier, the only accessible pier that we have, two accessible piers, Tower and Lloyd are both accessible piers. Maple is not accessible. Elder is accessible to a single individual right now. that drives down and has to gain access to that. That will be challenging as we move forward to have this being accessible. As Warren pointed out, that 4-foot differential drop between these two structures, that individual will have to come down here, come across, and then get out. This is providing that opportunity for anybody, once again, not having to drive down, anybody from Sheridan Road to get out and enjoy the beach and enjoy that new amenity for that purpose. And as mentioned before, it clearly defines that distance between the dog park here versus what was originally shown as a short step, if you will, in option 1.
So why is the dog beach not in this plan going to end up just like the property to the south of Lloyd, where the beach is way back, like Lloyd Beach is way out there, and then their beach is way back?
So right now, this steel is what's creating that definition. That's where the steel ends, and this is where the proposed breakwater for the 205 residency is shown currently. Once again, we're showing a more significant beach that's fuller, once again, because of water conditions here, but that this beach will grow, as I suggested. There's
Can I
the potential
clarify?
for that growth.
I'm not sure if you're talking about the beach between Tower and Lloyd?
No, I'm
Okay, what are
talking
you
about
talking
the
about?
beach on the property immediately
In this drawing.
in between, like,
The
right next to
waterfront?
Lloyd, when you go up and over the steps.
South of Lloyd?
South of Lloyd. or
The Jackson
that-
property?
The Jackson property. That beach is way far back. Because Lloyd is capturing all the sand. But that beach is smaller. When you look at the aerials, and the water is much
Yeah.
closer to the beach because the groin is smaller. And are we gonna end up with the same dynamic here?
The short answer is no. There is tributary water that comes down the bluff, then cascades through the bluff from overflow from the storm drain that's there. There's weakening through the rocks that was by design to be done because we have 40 feet more feet of beach south of that breakwater. That's that climate zone where it is washing out. And that's part of that design. for
There's
that
water that
overlay.
leaches out of the bluff that continues to erode that beach. You go down there, you see water trickling out through the stone almost continuously. So we don't have that naturally tributary water in this area.
Correct.
This will be more analogous to the space between Tower and Lloyd, where you have parallel structures that are 205 feet apart between Tower and Lloyd that have accumulated over 300 feet of sand beach by virtue of the length of Tower and Lloyd. You go back for the historic aerials, before the Lloyd boat ramp was installed, the beach went right up to the power plant. It the same, and basically cut right at the base of the bluff. Once we put in the initial boat ramp in the 60s, sand began to accrete. We extended it with the L, sand continued to accrete. There's over 300 feet of accretion. So I would anticipate, as shown on this plan, sand accreting by virtue of parallel groins, 225 feet or so apart, and that'll serve as our dog beach.
Question? In looking at this, what I call the Centennial Breakwater, why would we not, if 205 is building a breakwater, why would we not move that down to our boundary, our southern boundary here, and simply extend beyond where the 205 breakwater is? I don't know if you would do it with steel sheet piling up to, where that breakwater ends, and just take it out. As I look at this, the original vision was 1,000-foot beach that was wide open. And what we're creating here, from what I can see, is so fragmented. And this idea that we're gonna put, 170 feet, we're gonna strand 170 feet of some, I think it's probably one of the nicest beaches that we have of our 5. It may be the best beach with Dog Beach. Why wouldn't we move that down? And I think you'd save money if you could do it.
So once again, the clear definition between the two beaches is the reason that structure is identified where it is. that's selected there. It meets within the size recommendations, our review of other park districts and their beaches that they have for, for our four-legged friends. That's what was solidified and that's what was identified. Having that separation, having the ability to further separate that with the structure to help worry about the dog that
Costa,
swims around
Costa,
or have
we've
you.
gone through this ad nauseum.
Sure.
We've spent years. We, in October of 2022, agreed that we would incorporate a dog beach, no less than 170, no more than
Greater than.
270.
Right.
We passed a resolution in May adopting a plan that phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. Now, by virtue of this most generous donation of the Ishbia family, they just told us, put the land swap on hold, it's dormant, ain't gonna happen. And we are focused on, with the generous donation, the ability to move directly in one step to this plan. Now, in my ideal world, I'd love to cooperate with the village and get rid of that pier and relocate the stormwater as originally proposed. And then we would have a less cluttered beach. But until the village plays ball, we have to keep the pier in place.
They have their stormwater, they have their southeast stormwater study to do, so fair enough. And it may be a second piece of adjustment.
But we're still accommodating a future
Correct.
relocation of stormwater as originally envisioned. But again, point out, there are no more structures than exist today. But what there is this terrific ADA access, opportunity for people to get out onto the lake, and a proper separation between the people beach and the dog beach that otherwise cannot be accomplished through other than a big, heavy steel fence that will withstand the harsh waves in winter.
So I'm going to make a bold suggestion that we move, because we have 21 questions that may answer a lot of these issues for our audience and also for ourselves. And we do have our 2 experts here on the clock. So I'd love to take the next 60 minutes, Eric, you're running the meeting with your permission,
Of course.
to work through these questions, and that may answer some issues as well. Because we did go through all the public comment and look at all the questions that came up over and over and try and answer them in a conversational fashion with the experts here.
Yeah, so as a courtesy to the staff and commissioners and visitors, we're going to limit the conversation to 60 minutes. And we're at 7:06.
Can I just make one final comment about ADA? You know what's interesting? Maple Street is not ADA unless you call ahead so that you, what do they call the little metal pole?
Ballard.
The ballard, unless you call ahead and request to have that ballard lowered. Otherwise, it is not ADA accessible. And so we're saying that we want to make, on the waterfront plan, all these beaches ADA accessible. That is something that needs to be addressed, in my opinion, with Maple Street, because it is not. And our church picnic, we had people that could not go down because the ballard had not been lowered. We're spending a fortune on this ADA, a fortune. And here we have our oldest beach, I believe. I think Maple Street was our oldest beach. And it is truly not ADA accessible as this will be. So it's something to just
Put on the list. I agree. Okay.
Thank you.
All right,
So
Costa
ending our
again.
study session with Costa.
And the
You're gonna get
expert
tired, I
chiming in.
swear. Christina and Eric, thank you. As we've discussed before, a list of questions that have been put together and distributed. We had a chance as a staff to review this. We've had a chance to review this with our consultant team. We've populated our responses to those questions. We're going to go over those tonight. By no means are they finalized. This is still in draft format and open for discussion with the board as needed for clarification or if there's anything that's been missed. But we just want to start going through this. I want to split this up a little bit. I think some are best suited by John to explain. There's going to be some suited by our consultants to explain, and then I'll take on the others. So with that being said, John, do you want to start with the first one on where do we stand with the property swap?
Well, it's an active agreement, I guess it was signed in October of 2020. It's now dormant. So it's still an agreement, if you will, a legal document, but it's dormant. It's not to be acted upon. We certainly have litigation associated with it, so, but it's an active agreement, but in dormancy, if you will.
What does that mean? To me, it means the agreement's dead and it's time for us to say goodbye. I don't know, I'm looking at Mr. Williams here, and again, I'll hold my tongue about the 3 million. We've had a lot of promises over the last 3 years. What does it mean that it's dormant?
Well, there's no action to be taken by Orchard 2020 Revocable Trust right now. So we're not able to push that forward.
Can we get Adam to opine?
Yes, please.
We are engaged in pending litigation.
Well aware of that.
And so there's no action that we can take right now to perform the agreement. And so it is dormant, which is another adjective for on hold.
So it still exists and it's on hold, and we are entering now year number 4.
So it's
We've
still an
had-
option.
Look, we've
Right. We all
had,
know
we've
where
had
we
discussion
stand on
in this
that.
room.
Yeah.
We should all say, there's no political will to push this forward right now. That was the consensus of this group.
Right. Okay.
It's, you know, there's no point in talking about it because it's a subject of litigation, but there's just no political will to continue to pursue it, especially when it's gonna cost us money to defend a lawsuit that, you know, we really don't want to spend any more money on it.
Then can we mutually agree it's terminated?
I don't want to skirt around the issue that's currently being litigated. I'd rather let Adam have the final word and call it dormant and not stir anything up, because it is a pending litigation item, and so I'd rather move on.
This
Yeah.
exercise is to create an FAQ about the status of the beach and the agreement and the plans for the improvement of the beach. It's not an opportunity to negotiate and litigate the agreement.
Correct.
And we want to move forward, open Elder, improve Centennial, and deliver these improvements and get this issue behind us.
All right, from there, question 2, the question was asked, how much will this cost? Once again, the cost estimates are on the website. Right now, the 3 different phases. Phase 1, these are with contingency. It's $10,618,345. Phase 2 is $5,519,506. Phase 3 was $2,479,084, bringing a total for all 3 phases combined, if they were to be constructed, at $18,616,935. That does take in consideration a 15% contingency, which is $2,497,675, which would bring the project without contingency to $16,119,260.
And what about just phase 1 and 2 together?
Phase 1 and 2 together,
Done at once.
13,561.
Say again?
13,561,200.
yeah, $195,000.
$13,561,200, including contingency?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
And I will also just note that's without the stormwater being installed. If we were to install the stormwater, it'd be $14,093,070.
But we're not talking about installing stormwater, right?
I'm talking about the infrastructure into the breakwater.
Okay.
The preparatory
So,
infrastructure.
yes,
The
not the entire.
286,000, yeah,
Yes.
yeah, that's what.
Third question, John, I'll let you, when you're tackling this one, how will the Winnetka Park District pay for this project?
So the initial focus on that was for phase 1, and we had talked about this back in May. We have $4.9 million remaining from the alternate revenue bonds, $3 million from the Wind Trust debt certificate, $2.3 million from Recreation Fund unrestricted reserves, $310,000 of net proceeds from the sale of Library Park, which totals just more than $10,500,000. I think it's $510,000 if I remember correctly. There are other reserves that we have available that are unrestricted. Those are currently earmarked to support the golf course work, and so that's the number that we have for the phase one as it was presented, I don't know, it was 24 hours ago, right, Costa? So if you add what was amazing, I just learned tonight, of $3 million, that would cover the phase one and phase two, if I do my math correctly, phase one and phase two costs.
The next question, what is the WPD timeline for this project? Park District plans to complete the permit application by December 1st, 2023. Permit submittals are expected to be sent to regulatory agencies by December 15th, 2023. And then review of the steep zone bluff zone work as anticipated to be reviewed by the village in April of 2024. Of course, all of this work is subject to the approvals of those agencies accordingly. If we're able to move forward with a quick turnaround on permits, work can start early in 2024, and it would take the entire construction season of 2024, ending approximately December of 2024. Next question was, how long will the permitting process take? As discussed with our professionals, it could take anywhere from 6 months to 16 months. It all depends on how much information is requested upon from the regulatory agencies, the village, the time for them to review, their open public comment sessions, as well as any other back and forth that might need to go or might need to happen as part of that design work. But that process can take anywhere as short as 6 months, but as long to 16, depending on the agencies. Will the permitting process include public comment options? Of course, the answer is yes. Each permitting agency will have public comment periods. Both the IDNR and the Army Corps put it on the street, if you will, or out to public comment for 30 days. The village has public comment through their interactions at their community meetings as well during open sessions and when things go to a vote. So there is opportunity for community and public comment through the process. How will the new ordinances interact or enacted by the Village of Winnetka affect the timing? The new ordinances, notably the steep zone bluff, will lead the Park District to submitting application for that later in April of 2024. Unless, of course, the village moves that timeline forward with their study session, and that might end earlier. That could possibly move up. But right now, we're anticipating that the only effect would come out of anything with the steep zone bluff. Next question was, how will the Southeast Winnetka Stormwater Review affect the design of the stormwater discharge pipe? Once again, until the study is completed, we are unable to answer that question. We are anticipating the village to use their infrastructure in the short term, but as we discussed, the ability to provide additional conveyance, or in this case, a new design, as part of the initial design proposal by the Park District, potentially could help that with that. Of course, if
Go ahead, finish your thought.
I was going to say, of course, if the Park District, moves with their design or proposed, there could be the inclusion of the stormwater quality structures as we've discussed with the relocation of the existing outflow. But once again, we'll have to review that. There could be an impact to the tree canopy if the village decides that they need to extend or to increase the pipe size. But once again, without the study being completed, it's going to be hard to understand what that looks like.
I just wanted to circle back to item 7. The village will take us through their complete, before we go to the village council, we'll go through the complete village review process for our work.
Correct. As
Yeah.
once the question 7 goes back to the ordinance are enacted, correct. Along with that, you'll recall that the village did also put together the permitting process that they have final say on any improvements on the lakefront, so that will be part of the review process as well.
Thanks, sorry, didn't mean to derail you. Carry on. Excellent pace.
Number 9, how long will the construction process take? Right now, it's anticipated to take 1 construction season. Please note that is based on the understanding of the land-based construction. If, for whatever reason, the board does decide to move forward with the marine-based option, as we plan on budget, or bidding that out to have both variables, the potential of a elongated construction season for marine-based work could happen. Depending on working days met, correct me if I'm wrong, it might stretch into a second season. There's no way to really tell, because it's a shorter window.
I would still plan on one season.
Even if marine-based. Number 10, why aren't you considering water-based construction using barges? Once again, both construction methods will be bid out as part of our bidding work. We'll be able to understand what that looks like and have the opportunity to come back to the board with a cost for an alternate access for marine-based, or excuse me, for a alternate method of marine-based work for construction. Typically, that is more expensive, but we'll have the numbers to dictate. Number 11, when could the repaired and protected beaches be open to the public? Once again, the beaches, depending on construction, depending on permitting, probably would be the start of the 2025 season. Once construction is completed in late 2024, it would probably be during the winter months where it's not ideal to access the beaches, but they would essentially be open once construction is complete. But open for programming is probably anticipated in 2025. Number 12, what design changes have been made since the permits were pulled in June? Elder, land-based stormwater sewer was deleted. Breakwater geometry revised to straight shore perpendicular structures. Beach access pad was deleted. Land-based access road was deleted. Existing access road is now improved. Armor stone added to the south existing cheap pile groin. Centered breakwater spanning 261 property access and cell walkway was deleted. Center breakwater geometry revised to a straight north-south structure design with no shore leg tied in. Planting pockets were deleted. Centennial, the changes were Centennial breakwater was added. South breakwater was deleted. Land-based ADA improvements were added. And the breakwater, or boardwalk was added, along with the dog beach improvements were added, and the planting pockets were deleted. The next question was, why are the design and planning costs higher than the June 2022 estimates? Design costs are higher for a few different reasons. One, of course, is inflation. Inflation has affected all the materials costs, the labor, and fuel, which all have heavy impact on this project. Two, the previous design had larger breakwaters built to help create protection without having to further armor the toe of the bluff with additional steel sheet piling. Three, the current holding plan of the property exchange agreement has split the design, which in turn requires the project to be built in multiple phases, providing construction costs with multiple mobilizations and years of work. Four, the park board's request to go out for an RFQ process to identify coastal engineering to rework the project and lend new design perspective, duplicated soft costs. Number 14, why not to consider a reef? Matt, I'm going to kick this one over to you. Do you want to review why an offshore reef is not the best design option?
Okay, the proposed steel sheet pile bulkhead and wave wall will provide the primary means of shore protection for the Elder site. No additional offshore structures will be needed to stabilize the site for design conditions. Further, a reef is not an appropriate means of shore protection for this project. The primary shore protection for the Centennial site is already in place, which was constructed in 1987 and is unchanged. No additional means of shore protection are required for the Centennial site. Reefs are effective in a wave reduction in shallow water condition, but reefs do not provide complete wave protection. All they do is reduce the wave heights. Further, reef breakwaters are not designed to hold beach. Again, they're only designed to reduce wave action. They're designed to break waves further offshore to help reduce wave energy onshore. They're typically placed 300 to 400 feet offshore. Additionally, reefs pose a significant liability hazard to boaters, as they're usually placed near or below a designated water level, which is why the structures are called a reef breakwater, making them a nearshore hazard in areas not marked. And finally, for a reef structure placed on these sites, reefs typically are effective when you have a much larger site because you place the reefs a good deal offshore, so their influence, depending on the direction of the wave action, is directed off-site on a smaller site. So if we have two different beaches, one being 410 feet, the other being 590, the effectiveness of an offshore reef would be essentially zero, unless it's just a due east wave, and you rarely get only a due east wave, because the influence of northeast or southwest is going to affect the properties north and south of our site. It would have no effect on Centennial or Elder.
The next question, what repairs needed to be made to the Elder and Centennial Beach project? Currently at Elder, primary shore protection must be added to the shoreline south of the existing sheet pile bulkhead. Damaged gating baskets and blankets need to be removed, and the foundation of the existing pier at the Loveland Beach concrete needs to be properly protected. Additionally, offshore debris and failed structures will need to be removed to provide a safe swimming beach. At Centennial, the northern corner needs to be stabilized, and stabilized access to the beach needs to be provided. Next question, what protective elements are proposed for the beaches and bluffs? Matt, if I can have you go ahead and jump in on number 16.
Sure, as Costa described expertly earlier, the EPOC Phase 1, we put in shore perpendicular breakwaters and proposed at Elder and Centennial to aid beach stabilization. Again, beach stabilization only, not shore protection. The Elder Bluff stabilization will be provided by the proposed shoreline improvements, that being the steel bulkhead, which will essentially mimic the bulkhead that's currently in place at Centennial. Centennial's northern corner at 261 will be stabilized using the proposed steel sheet pile retaining wall and a slope cutback. Otherwise, no other bluff stabilization is required at the Centennial site. And similar to Lloyd Beach, the installation of stone breakwaters will help facilitate a more stable coastal beach system during the fluctuating Lake Michigan water levels and storms. The size of the breakwaters will be determined by the size of the beach needed for programming, not for providing bluff protection, as that's already in place with existing steel seawalls.
Matt, thank you. John, if you want to cover number 17, why don't we go out to a referendum for this?
Yep. So referendum requirements are determined by the laws governing a municipality. The Park District is not required, based on its laws governing the Park District. The Park District is not required to go to referendum for the Elder Centennial project.
John, thank you. And then why is repairing, protecting, and adding ADA access to the beaches a top priority in spending? John, would you like to cover that?
We've maintained a commitment to ensure any patron of any ability has shoreline and lake access to each of the 5 beaches. The design of the ADA amenities will allow a patron to travel from the parking lot along a properly pitched sidewalk to a boardwalk and a ramp where the patron can easily access Centennial Beach and Lake Michigan, and then return safely to her or his car or vehicle.
Sure. Number 19, why is the design different from the Lloyd, which was successfully executed 3 years ago? The original design for Elder Centennial was almost identical to Lloyd, you might remember, minus the steel sheet piling and the connections to the bluff toe and the planting pockets, of course. The loss of property exchange in response to public comments and design changes by the park board has modified the plan to what we have to date. The next question is what is happening to the Dog Beach? The Dog Beach will remain post-construction, and as identified previously by the park board, will maintain the length between 170 to 270 feet. That was adopted by the park board in 2022, and further designs will allow for access to that beach in a controlled setting as we have currently. And then the last question, how will the public trust doctrine be observed, allowing water's edge walking? Once again, all phases of the phase plan for Elder Centennial include access for visitors both north and south and from East Independent Beach to traverse north and south according to the principles of the public trust doctrine. Those were the questions that were identified and presented from John and to staff to answer. Are there any questions or concerns or anything that the board would like to go investigate further or discuss? regards to any of these questions or answers.
Okay, so we did have some other questions that were submitted by a commissioner.
Sure.
And then I think, do you have a comment before
Just a
those
comment.
additional questions? Okay, so that comment and then the additional questions that were submitted.
Lots of words.
Yeah.
I've been on this for 9 years. Lots of words. Very difficult. You and I, when you speak those words, you have an image in your head, you know what you're speaking to. In order to properly answer these questions, to have the public understand it, we need pictures. We need narrative, but we need pictures to go along with it. If there's something that I would put to Scott Lakota, we've got to be able to communicate more effectively these concepts. So, human beings are really good at conjuring up words to create images in our mind if we're familiar with the information. But for those who aren't, it means nothing. So I am grateful for all the effort that's been put into the narrative, but I think it needs to be prepared in a way that is illustrated. We try to do that with 3 different open houses to answer these questions. We've got a lot of the material. Let's try and reference those exhibits or more to bring context to this, and as well as the 3D visual renderings that we talked about.
That's part of the point. And the goal with these is to write them up and to create a QR code and to present it at the farmer's market and also to present it in hard copy and put it up on our website, just so we have a record of these items. We have some additional questions that were submitted by some other commissioners.
I think we will take the step, unless you tell us otherwise, we'll start with the answers, and then we'll add the exhibits and pictures as quickly as we can.
Correct.
Yep, so Commissioner Rapp, thank you. So I'm going to read Commissioner Rapp's questions, and or did you want to pass them out?
No.
Okay.
Thank you.
So the first question, as those are being passed out, has a site analysis or existing conditions been completed for Elder and Centennial beyond the photos from the workshops? Is there an actual report that can be provided? So I'd actually posted on question 1, has a site analysis or existing conditions been completed for Elder Centennial beyond the photos from the workshops? Is there an actual report that has been provided? So that might be either in your wheelhouse or in...
Are we going to answer these tonight, or are we going to put the questions out so that we can post a proper time to answer?
If we can answer these tonight, because we do have our experts here, great. If we do need to do more work, then we do need to do more work. We have a second study session on October 5th. We can absolutely roll any questions that need additional research to October 5th.
So basically for number 1, the site analysis of the existing conditions, all the sites have been investigated, all the sites have been reviewed initially in the original master plan. That hasn't changed much. And then along with the design team, we've reviewed all the sites. Has there been a formal analysis or report of those findings? Once again, that's based on the work that's been prepared and managed by the Lakota Group, as well as Matt and his team. Nothing that would be to the point to be shared. Matt and Scott, unless there's something that I'm missing, there's no formal report or anything. It's based on the site conditions. We drove the model and design based on the conditions, correct?
In the current survey.
And the current survey, yes. So the analysis, I guess, would be the existing survey that we have, would be the closest thing that we have to a formal document per se. But we can definitely answer that. Second question, are the bluffs at Elder and Centennial actually failing in any way? What is the risk assessment for failure based on data? How has this been quantified? Has the factors of safety been calculated? So once again, reviewing this, I'd love to have an opportunity to talk with the design team a little bit further, just to make sure that everything is being stated and accurate, so I'm not putting out any false information. Scott or Matt, if there's anything that you would like to add.
I don't think the bluffs are failing at all. I think the bluffs need to be revegetated, and in doing so, stabilize the toe of the bluff as part of our shoreline stabilization. It's all part of one big system, I think, that was identified in the master plan. Also, the vegetative inventory of all the bluffs was part of the original master plan. We had Cardno as our environmental research component of that plan.
Views, right? Views were primary to the entire lakefront master plan, that we have allowed the bluff to essentially go native. There's invasive species, volunteer growth that obscures virtually the entirety of the lake from Elder. And while we started on that slope at Centennial, there are portions of Centennial that are completely obscured. So part of the primary work was to essentially revisit the bluffs, take all that stuff out, replant it with lower stabilizing material. That's the Cardno piece that we can and should act upon. But until we address that shoreline piece, or the Toa Bluff piece that Matt was talking about, linking the existing steel bulkheads so that we have one continuous line of shoreline and bluff protection, then we can safely remove the invasives and the other vegetation and replace it with plant material that can be actively maintained and afford views of the lake from our parks.
And regarding the bluff failures, the only ones that I'm aware of, there are none, but the south side of 261 and north side of Centennial, there's 3 old retaining walls there that are not failing, but they're well past their life cycle. But that's part of our work. We carried some money in as a line item in the cost estimate to address that. And then finally,
well, then you also want to address the gabion baskets.
That's the other piece, correct.
Yeah.
and again, that's taking care of the process, and those can be removed and replaced.
Those
And that's
items-
those trying to stabilize with the new proposed tree pile.
Right, they haven't fully failed, but under high lake conditions, if we sustained further high lake conditions, failure was almost imminent. Along with the undercutting of the concrete to the pier, as well as the undercutting of the concrete to the structure itself for the beach house, those were all things that were at risk when we were under the high water conditions.
We also have something on the the southern edge of Centennial, north of the existing property line. Wasn't there an 8-foot?
There was a slab timber wall there that has been removed and replaced at the generosity of, Justin Ishbia and his team, because that was the right thing to do at no cost to the agency. But yes, that was another component. Once again, they haven't failed directly, but they were just about, the business. I think, Matt, you termed it at at their life expectancy.
Again, for the benefit of the community and people that are watching, 1987 was the last all-time high, well, it was the actual all-time recorded high in the past 100 years. It was the last time the Park District made a substantial investment in Elder and Centennial. Susie and I have talked about this. You both remember that at that point in time, the bluff was caving into the lake. So those steel sheet piling, the extensive steel sheet piling at Centennial, and about 100 feet of sheet piling at Elder were driven in place in 1987 prior to the October all-time high. And we were able to backfill and basically rebuild the bluff. Otherwise, it was a lot like what was happening at Lloyd. So we are at risk, if we don't take action during the next high water period, that those gabion baskets would fail. Now is the time to do it. The lake is receded, and we've obviously come up with this comprehensive plan to do it.
Question 3, what are the results of the soil boring work recently undertaken by TSC, and what does that mean in terms of design implication? Matt, if you want to go ahead and answer that.
The results are the boring work is done and the lab analysis is done. We, the design team, have done nothing with it because it's not been authorized to proceed with any design work. But
Once we have a
information will be
finalized
used-
plan, we'll move on to that next step.
Yep. But that'll be used as our basis for the design direction for the new steel sheet pile or any work we do on
Right, basically to our construction documents, we're going to base our construction
But
documents
they-
design
nothing but put
off
in
of
the
that
file.
work. Question 4, why is the steel sheet pile necessary? can the natural bluff be repaired with gaping baskets and improved by landscaping, yield favorable results? Does the answer vary in different parts of this project? So once again, as we've shown in the high lake conditions, the reason we have the infrastructure, the bluffs that we do, is because of the steel sheet piling that was driven. That is all bets are off. That's the solidifying the bluff, that we will not have that issue, and that's what's been designed in our current plan, along with the wave walls behind it. If we were to use gaping baskets in that type, with an improved landscaping, Matt, from your standpoint, that's not a viable option. That's a temporary repair. It's not an actual shore protection, correct?
That's just throwing money in the lake.
And then different parts of the project. Once again, I don't think there are different parts of the project. I think we're looking at the holistic approach to the lake shore, both Elder and Centennial combined, just because it's on the north side of Centennial versus the south side of Elder. It still has the exact same type of exposure. Number 5, will the current design address stormwater flooding of the beach house at Elder? I'm not sure what that means.
Master plan, it called out that there was a problem with the driveway having stormwater run into the beach house.
I know that the proposed pitch and the curb and gutter and the drainage that's going to be done with the widening will address any of the concerns with runoff on the slope, so that would be addressed. Number 6, has beach testing for bacteria been undertaken over the past 2 years at Elder, and can the data be shared? What is the expected impact in this area of the current design and the future design? Data testing has been taken, I want to say, since May, I believe, or June. Kyle started that. I'll have to check back in with the recreation department. That's something that staff keeps, and we can review that with the board as needed. What is the expected impact in this area of the current design? Once again, until we have a final design and it's been reviewed, if we decide to take on hydraulic modeling, Matt, that is the only way to really truly understand how the impact will be, what impact there would be, correct?
First, you need to determine or define what do you mean by expected impact? What does that mean? What impact of what?
Does the second question relate back to the bacteria question, or is it
Yes.
an independent question?
Yes, the bacteria.
So the bacteria coming out of the stormwater pipe, how that's going to be impacted with the current design. So once again, that would be, if we took under modeling and reviewed that would be the only true way to tell.
You have to hire someone who actually does that.
No, I understand that, but that would be the way to identify that, would be through an additional scope of work with a third party that does that specifically.
Once
Right
again,
now-
this is an opportunity to address a village stormwater issue. The Park District has nothing to do with the stormwater system. It is a village-owned and operated system. That pipe was installed in 1947 underneath the pier in collaboration between the Park District and the village. The village paid for the pipe, the Park District paid for the pier. Agreed to in 45, designed in 46, installed in 47. There were cross connects. People that are familiar with this town know that Elder had the highest level of beach closure due to high bacteria levels. The village did extensive work to identify significant problems. They corrected those. The bacteria levels have improved dramatically since the village undertook those repairs upwards of 10 years ago. So that stormwater pipe is 54 inches in diameter. It serves over 300 acres of southeast Winnetka, from west of Green Bay Road, all the way up towards North Shore Country Day. All of southeast Winnetka discharges through that Elder storm sewer system because it's naturally tributary to the lake. So that isn't changing. What we can do is get that pipe further north and further out, or we can leave it in its existing location. But the rain falls, the stormwater is collected, and it discharges through that pipe, and it's a village issue. We're willing to work in collaboration to address it, but absent village action, it isn't going to change.
Number 7, what level of shoreline protection does the design assure? What metrics are used to assist in the used to assess this form for coastal engineering standpoint to compare to alternatives? So Matt, we've talked about this a little bit. The protection of the design, what does it assure?
Yeah, the design criteria is based on 20-year wind, wave, and water levels.
Say it again.
20-year recurrence interval of wind, wave, and water levels. To go any higher, to go any higher, I should tell you, will grossly exceed your available design budget or construction budget. And to go, the difference between going from a 20-year design to say 50 or 100 is it might be incrementally structurally, but your net impact is, when you get those out of event storms, things are going to happen. So a typical industry standard for a project like this is 20-year storm. We go higher, but
So Matt,
it's a
in
function of money.
1987, the all-time recorded high, Harza Engineering prepared plans, and those plans called for steel sheet piles at elevation 589
Yep.
with gabion blankets or mattresses going up to 592,
Yep.
correct?
Yep.
So that, we've sustained the most recent high level, water level protection, so we're matching that, is that
Which
accurate?
is consistent with everything I've been doing up and down the west side of Lake Michigan for 40 years,
I think
coincidentally.
I think answering this question requires some context, because it requires the board to explain the balance it's trying to put between shoreline protection and vistas. And it's not clear from the question what the priority is. So I think it's important to say that the Park District is balancing the priorities between shoreline protection and protecting the vistas.
Well, let's be more explicit. We accomplished both at Lloyd, the shoreline, the bluff protection, and the beach preservation through the implementation of a headland beach system. Everybody's familiar with that. The village and the community expressed reservation about the height of the groins and about those enclosures. So we're taking a different tack.
That's what I
We're
mean.
utilizing the existing steel, so the bluff protection is provided by the steel, the beach preservation is provided by the stone, but we've lowered the stone to prioritize vistas over beach. There won't be as much beach at Elder and Centennial as there is at Lloyd, because the stone is lower.
And we do know through the plan work we've done that every foot you raise the breakwaters, for each breakwater you add $1 million to construction costs. For each foot you go up.
Each foot.
Yep. So we've been told 585 period. That's what I used because that's what I've been told to use from the minute I walked in this room. And then the other structures are based on my experience with similar projects and what Harza did, but using the 20-year, see what the effect of the 20-year recurrence interval.
So again, for the benefit of everybody at home, Lloyd was at 587 at the outer edge, going up to 591 at the bluff.
86.
Say again?
586.
586. And then it quickly goes to 587 at the end of the hook.
That's correct.
And then it comes to 591. We're talking about starting 4 feet lower and going out and keeping it down at 585, which is consistent with the height of the existing Elder Pier.
But again, Lloyd is designed to provide shore protection.
Right.
Our breakwaters are not for shore protection, they're for sand retention only.
Right. I'm trying to emphasize the prioritization of vistas as set forth in the most recent village ordinances.
Next question, what does the amount of the average beach coverage and swimming water depth look like at high, medium, and low water levels? Once again, those designs can be rendered, but it depends on the review.
There's going to be different answers for literally everybody who answers this question, because how you define high, medium, and low water levels.
We can provide examples, let the experts do it.
So just, we have to be clear what high, medium, and low mean, so everyone
Yeah.
defines it the same way.
Kenilworth have exact, like lines, like the sand is this big in the
But
visual
they
based
have to
on-
define what high water means.
They
can-
had-
we can do it.
They
We
did
can do it.
levels, they
We
had
can
big
do it.
levels defining it.
They also had 3D renderings, so you could see in Plan A, B, and C.
But I just haven't, I mean, Scott did an off-the-cuff, on-the-fly calculation for the swimming beach depth, but I think that's a really important attribute to understand. Like, I mean, when people go to the beach, are they like up to their ankles or to their?
I'm not suggesting it's not possible to answer it, just make sure that we have a consistent answer, so we know high water means it's at what level, and medium means what level, and low
Yeah.
means what level. Yeah.
It's possible from the Michigan data, I was not smart enough to calculate it.
Right, but like, there's no high water level meaning, so we have to define it for our.
Understood.
for our-
Well, there's-
Understood.
There's
2020.
recorded record, high, record, low.
You have to
There's a-
pick
there's a
them.
mean water
Yeah,
level.
right.
We'll define the 3 water levels. Costa?
What do the sidelines look at in various locations under the current design? Under any alternatives? Once again, that's going to be forthcoming once we get those rendered as part of the additional scope of work. Will the playground at Elder be renovated while the other work is being done? What does this equipment, when does this equipment need to be replaced in any case? Right now, we are anticipating to align that with the replacement. I'd have to go back to our schedule. I don't have that off the top of my head, but we can answer that based on our renovation schedule that we have for all of our playground sites. Number 11, what is the planning process for the overall sites for elements that are not addressed in the current plans, e.g. playground, parking lot, non-bluff landscaping, or changes, other lighting, etc.? So currently, the playground and the other components, the parking lot is identified, non-bluff landscaping is not. Those are things that are being looked at and will be done on a regular basis. This is not a master plan of the entire park. This is a master plan of the beaches and the lakefront. But we can address those items as well. Those are low-cost items that typically get punched up during construction as well. 12, given that the current designs will not be intended to retain sand at Elder, what is the anticipated ongoing replenishment required? What does this look like for each distinct cell, e.g. will the design require further replenishment for the dog beach? So right now, once again, that's going to be part of our design. Once we land on design, we'll be able to come back with costs and assumptions based on, once again, low, medium, high lake conditions.
Part of the permit application is you have to provide a drawing of each beach overfilled 20% and provide a 5-year beach nourishment plan.
Correct. 13, does it make more sense to only build on the south side initially to increase the chance for sand to accumulate naturally? So whatever I would suggest that the answer would be no, because whatever we build and we retain has to be done as part of what Matt just suggested with the net or the sand.
Sand retention is a
Retention,
system.
thank you.
Yeah, sand retention is the system. If you only do half, you could have a failure. You have to do all or nothing.
The sand monitoring, we have to submit bathymetry within 12 months of when the original plan was designed, and then we have to do year monitoring. So if we show that we've collected more sand than the original design in question, then we have to put back sand that was accumulated, dredge that out, if I'm not mistaken, and add more sand to the system that was robbed from downstream, correct?
Well, as part of, there's a 5-year annual monitoring program. We survey the car 5 years. They didn't determine if you have accretion or deletion. And then they tell you what to do. If you have too much of an accretion, they tell you what to do with it. If you have deletion, they require you to replenish.
Right, depending on the action plan over that 5-year.
All part of the permit process.
14, will we be surveying the public on the additional design options as we move forward with refinements? Once again, that would be a decision based on the board and direction given to staff. So I couldn't answer that one verbatim, but that could be given to the board to ask and answer. 15, why would we not wait for the East Winnetka Stormwater Management Study to be completed before building permit infrastructure that might not be adequately addresses the need? So once again, based on our initial plan, the product that we would suggest would be based on the plan that we actually went to permit with working with the village, and they signed off on it. But that is a potential risk. Before we would build the infrastructure, we would review the plan with the village, make sure they signed off on it. If they felt that the infrastructure wasn't either adequate or required, they could give us direction to not include it, and then we can make that determination at that time. 16, is it possible to pursue a short-term temporary approach to have Elder open safely with pier repair of gaving baskets, etc.? Do these require permits, and if they are for repair and maintenance of existing infrastructure, or is there an emergency process that can be used to fast-track these items? Can we work above the high water mark to be undertaken sooner? What are the costs? So there's several questions in 16. We could render what that approach was. Once again, we've done that previously. I think we put some estimated cost repairs together for I think it was our 6 or 7 phase plan that we put together when we presented at Hubbard Woods about a year and a half ago. We could re-review that.
August of 2022.
A year ago, excuse me. And we could review that. The short answer is yes, permits will be required. I would say that the fast track these items, I would say the answer is no, because they're not emergency repair at this time, based on the review of the IDNR and the Army Corps. Matt, would you agree to that the smaller repairs would not be fast-tracked as an emergency because they are not? It would be smaller items.
Yeah, you're not actually losing any of your bluff or any structures, there's no.
And then it also.
Public safety.
Apologize. And then the last piece, can the work above the high water mark be undertaken sooner, and what are the costs? The work couldn't be taken sooner because even though it's above the high water mark, that would still invoke the village process, and that would still invoke the IDNR process. So we would still have to proceed with permits with both of those agencies before we could take the projects on. And then what are the costs? I would have to get back to you. I wouldn't be able to answer that short term here tonight. Will any further enhancements be needed to increase safety or security? What is the process to be reviewed and considered? When you say any further enhancements, are you talking about once the plan is complete, after phase 1, after phase 2? Is there some clarity to that?
I'm just thinking, like, people are accessing the beach through the fence. I feel like with Cherry Street, we had some success with partnering with the village, with the beach attendants, but I think we've also had some success at, the gate closing at 9 o'clock and then reopening early in the morning. I don't know if there are other enhancements or things that we should be considering with this project that could help with some of those challenges. Because it's not an area that we've really thought about in the context of this project specifically, from what I can tell.
Well, we've put up a fence initially for the road to go down to Elder, and that's not the
Tower, Maple, Lloyd.
as far as.
It's virtually impossible.
Is this before or after
to keep
construction?
people off the beach.
After
Yeah.
construction? Sure. Further investigation would have to be done to better understand, all the exposure and everything else. I'm sure there will be some measures that need to be taken, but I would have to review that before I can answer that. The last question, have there been any revisions to the cost estimates that were provided last? What is the next point that we should anticipate for the cost information? The current cost for our new plan is on the website currently, and that shows all 3 phases of work. So that is asked and answered, and we can show that very easily.
It's dated September 5th.
Yep.
Remember, I submitted these on Friday last week.
Sure. So those were the questions that were asked to Cynthia. Short-term answers were given. how would the board like us to proceed with these questions, integration with the questions that were discussed previously?
So, do you want me to take this one?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, I'm sorry, don't mean to be jumping on your thunder.
No thunder.
We have another study session on October 5th, and I'd like to roll anything that we can research and answer into the October 5th session, together with anything else that crops up. Does that sound like a good way to approach it? Okay.
So taking into consideration the additional 18 questions, I think we'll be, if I'm not mistaken, at 39 overall.
Yeah.
The context of some of the answers or questions that are being asked in Cynthia's memorandum here, I think are a little bit further in depth on a few. Once again, the approach is high-level answers, and then I've heard tonight to pick those answers with any visuals to help explain that. Is that what I'm hearing from the board consensus?
For round one, the FAQs and the QR code or whatever we can get done to hand out by the farmer's market on Saturday, it would be great to write up as many of these as we can. We have some visuals, we have some pictures. These three, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 that we have, we'll include those, attach those. We'll attach the construction budgets as amended. And then the ones that require additional research will roll to October. That's it.
I would say the ability to get out the initial 21 and kind of make sure that they're answered in the form of an FAQ, not too lengthy, quick to the point, if you will. I would say to add the additional photos or the illustrations, there's no way by Saturday by the farmer's market, that's not reasonable.
Understood.
Yeah, no, I don't think anybody expects that to happen by Saturday.
We
No,
can
the stuff that
definitely
we've got
add
on the board
a
packet is
link
great.
to the illustrations and then the cost estimates as well as part of that QR code. So that's all three pieces will be in there so they can reference a little bit.
Perfect.
So I think that's achievable. I would say Cynthia's by the farmer's market, probably not. I am off tomorrow, so I apologize.
No, but they're a little bit more,
they're
a little bit more in depth. Some of them require a little bit more research, and some of them are second level questions.
Right.
I don't want to bury the lead here. I think this board acted in May to advance a plan. This issue has been before this board. It's been sucking the oxygen out of the room for over a year or more. 2 years, 3 years now. You just heard from representatives from Orchard 2020 that there's no desire to push forward with the swap. The desire is to heal. The desire is to move on. The desire is to improve Elder and Centennial as depicted, and there's been a very generous donation, a pledge of $3 million that will afford the Park District the opportunity to move directly to Phase 2 as amended to address the concerns expressed by the village ordinance. So I would like to see that in order that we move forward and actually get the work done in 2024, that we need to have this design resolved by the October meeting, submit for permits yet this fall, and go through the design review process as outlined by the village, and let's arrive at a conclusion with the permit process in the spring so we can move forward with construction next year.
I think everybody's on that same page. I think we want to make sure that we've done as much as we can to educate people, to help them understand what our plans are.
And one of my concerns is that Caucus has just released their survey, and they have pertinent questions, in my opinion, that could affect, we would actually possibly finally get some public comment on some of this. And so, you know, we're fast tracking this. No, you don't think we are?
Fast track, 3 years, fast track.
Well,
I don't think so.
No, I think, I would say this. I would say that in the changes that we've made, we've responded to public comment that we've gathered in a variety of ways. And in answering these questions, when I went back through all the public comment questions, I'm going to assume that the people who are most activated on this issue are the people who have been paying attention the most. those will also be the people that we'll hear from in the caucus survey.
Well, that's a big
I'm-
assumption.
Well,
That's a large
I'm-
assumption.
I'm hopeful that the caucus survey will generate some interesting results, but I believe we have the information from the most engaged citizens that have spoken to us. And I believe that we have an opportunity to act. We've already voted. Now we're in the process of explaining before we go to permitting. So I think that's where we are. We had one set of changes as a function of the village sort of delaying their repair, moving of the stormwater discharge pipe. So this is an attempt to answer the questions as a result of that change. But I think the rest of this is pretty much following the May 25th resolution.
Again, we keep changing this design, and we've had someone who did designs, along with Scott, someone in your line of work, come and say, every time that you make a change, you've got to look at the whole picture, because it changes the whole picture. And so the design we started with was 1,000-foot beach. And it was going to be wide open, and look where we are now. It's saddening. Just my commentary.
I think we are ready to move forward with the agenda items as presented.
Thank you, Costa.
Thank you, Costa, that was a lot.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Matt Wright.
Matt
Thank
and
you.
Scott.
Scott.
Yes, and thanks to staff for ensuring a combined the initial question. So moving along, agenda item number 7, staff reports.
Jim, you want to go first?
Sure. Thank you, Eric. The big item on the finance side of the world is the 2024 budget preparation. We're working with other members of the staff to put the 2024 budget together. Most of the numbers have been input into the system. We're beginning to prepare the PowerPoint presentations, and we're starting to draft the skeleton of the 2024 budget book. We look forward to presenting the first portion of our 2024 budget request at the committee of the whole meeting on October 5th. We'll do a second presentation at the second full board meeting in later October. And then we will be presenting our 2024 tax levy at the meeting in November, for early meeting in November for your review, and the second meeting in November for voting, so we can submit it to Cook County before the December 26th due date. So that is the timeline we have for our 2024 budget.
Thank you, Jim. Costa?
Eric, thank you.
more?
Few items to report.
Just a question on the budget process, sorry.
Go ahead.
Are you planning to do an initial pass in pairs again this year, or no? In commissioner pairs?
Well, we can absolutely do that, yes. That seemed to work very well last year.
No, I thought it was good, because then the first round of questions was resolved.
Right. Right, and we can schedule that, on an ad hoc basis.
Okay.
Sorry.
Oh, you're fine. I was just looking at the calendar, just so the board is aware, we're going to be presenting on the 5th. I would say the last week of September would probably be ideal for those meetings. So, staff updates, a few items that have been going on in Parksfield and some other facilities. Some of you might be aware, some of you might have unfortunately smelled. We had some issues over at Tennis recently, where we had a blockage in one of our sewer pipes. So that's why the bathrooms, locker rooms, and some of the other areas along the east corridor have been closed. The lounge was also affected, unfortunately, because of some floor drains. That effort was resolved. The blockage was removed. Things were cleaned up. I'd like to take the opportunity to lend my gratitude not only to the entire tennis team, Pat, Joe, Alexander, and others there, but also the Parks maintenance team. We kind of put all hands on deck, worked collaboratively together to get that done and taken care of in short order to make sure that nothing was truly affected, and we tried to get back operational as quickly as possible. So that was an issue that we've undertook. Currently, everything has been cleaned up, everything has been sanitized, cleaned and cleansed, if you will. We have measurements for additional carpet that's going to be replaced, but that's all been removed. Baseboards removed, everything's been cleaned, as I said. So that's, you're going to see a couple inherent costs for that here coming up shortly, and probably the next round of vouchers when we see that in a month and a half here. So just be aware of that. Golf course construction is moving strong. The deadline for seeding on the final course is a week from tomorrow. That was identified through that. There was a discussion at the last board meeting with the cover presentation of a request from the construction firm, the GC on the job, to Mayo Brothers, to extend that timeline potentially 2 weeks for final seeding on the par 3 course. With that being said, all the work on the primary course, the championship course, will be completed. Currently, they're finishing out seeding and seeding and final grading on holes 18, number 1. They were working on 18 green today. We had a chance to meet with the contractor, went through all of that. The request, as it's been reviewed and discussed, had a chance to further that request with the stormwater liaisons, both James Hemmings and Warren James. We sat down with the village staff and all of our consultants at the table to review the request. There were concerns around the grow-in for the 18-hole course. With the update that we received today, we're assured that the seeding for the 18-hole course will be completed in time, and the delay will be minute in regards to seeding of the par 3 course, tees and greens, and then the access road that they use for construction access going out. Had a chance to review that request with Adam Simon, along with the village staff and their attorneys. We are currently working together in collaboration to draft a letter between both parties, the Park District and the village, to honor the request from the Mayo Brothers to extend for 2 weeks. Right now, it shouldn't need 2 weeks, like I said, but with current rain and everything else, we just want to make sure that we had enough time in there. Part of the request was to defer potential costs that might be incurred by the contractor in an effort of goodwill and good faith with the excellent job that they've done thus far. Close timetable, along with the additional work that we've added to the scope, we felt that was more than agreeable by both parties. So Adam and I are working through that with Peter Friedman and James Bernal, but just be aware that the golf course seeding for the 18-hole course and all improvements to the 18-hole course will be completed by the 15th, as identified in the IGA, with some lingering pieces on the par 3 seeding only, which will be completed the following week, no later than October 1st as the new deadline for seeding on that portion of the job. Just wanted to make sure that the board was aware of that. Are there any other questions that the board has in regards to that?
Commissioner James?
Just a comment, and this goes out to the public again. We continue to have people that walk on the newly seeded areas, whether they're playing, whether they're walking their dog, or just curious onlookers, or people even riding their bikes.
Playing golf.
This is,
Oh, no. Oh, no.
this has to stop. Please,
Oh, no.
be respectful of the millions of dollars of improvements. Wilmette recently completed their renovation. They opened the course early and they lost a lot of grass. We cannot afford this to happen. Please, be respectful of the improvements that are being made. Stay off the course. If you see someone on the course, admonish them. Tell them, be respectful. Get off the course. Wait till it's ready for play.
To that point, I believe Kemper is doing chores this weekend with Andrew Gardner, the superintendent or the director of agronomy for the Winnetka Golf Club, to help that. I'm sure if their public is interested to view the course, check in with the pro shop. I'm sure the member of the team would be glad if they walk them through the project at a set time and date. But yes, be very respectful, if you will, of the course conditions, especially during the growing time. This is the most vulnerable that course will be in right now, between now and final or start of opening, which will be hopefully summer of next year. Yeah. Tomorrow afternoon, the Winnetka Women's Club. John, are you going to cover that one? Or?
Yeah, I'll cover it.
Okay.
just with the grass growing, are we able to get that also in the broad village newsletter, with our stormwater update? You know, we have reached a critical point in the stormwater
Yeah,
project.
we'll have.
Because I feel like I
discussed that
saw,
already.
I feel like I saw the communication in one email that was golf specific, but I don't feel like it's gone broad enough.
I'll work on that tomorrow.
That's already been discussed.
It may not make it into tomorrow evenings or tomorrow afternoon's village announcement. but
Yeah, yeah,
I'm sure
no,
it's in the
but I
next
just
one.
feel like,
As many ways we can communicate as possible. right?
yes. I mean, like, I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's, I mean, it's really important, so.
Anything else, Costa?
We can cover all this as well.
Yep.
That's it for me,
Yeah,
too.
recreation.
Taylor, you're new to the big stage, but not new to our meetings.
Thank you.
Thanks for,
Thank you.
She's been
thanks for
awesome.
stepping up.
Of course.
Anything you'd like to add to the meeting tonight?
No, but technology is running smoothly.
It is.
so-
Good feedback today. Denise, any items you'd like to?
I will just continue to keep you all up to date when I get announcements from GovHR.
Okay, terrific.
Well, and the other thing is Denise is in the process of training herself up to be our parliamentarian. So, yes, so.
You get Friday updates on the GovHR search for the executive
I do.
director candidates, right? So we'll have an update from them tomorrow, right?
Excellent, thank you.
John, anything else?
I have a plethora, so bear with me. On the HR front, the director, bear with me, we have the title for Recreation and Facilities, which includes recreation programming across tennis and what have you. We have our final 2 candidates that we'll be interviewing in the next couple of days, so that's great news. Staying with HR, Beth has been terrific. She's advancing the classification and compensation study and the board's approval. So that's moving forward. The personnel policy manual being finalized to be put on the website. So those, I think, are and then we've made a change with our benefits broker. So we'll have a significant increase in technology and related services to the employees. But Beth has been hard at work. So those are HR elements. On the recreation front, Fall Fest and Bike Winnetka. So the Bike Winnetka program will be September 23rd from 3:30 to 5. And overlapping that is Fall Fest from 4 to 7. So those are both on September 23rd. Today we had a Core Power Yoga program with 86 participants out on the turf field, which was pretty exciting to see. So a huge tip of the cap to Taylor. You were participating with that, as did James Janescu, so that was fantastic. Again, Taylor and James hosted a PTO D36 kickball program earlier this week with more than 250 5th and 6th graders. They were not in class, so they had a huge kickball tournament with some pizza and Kona ice. So that was, again, thank you, Taylor, for making that happen, as well as James. Tennis, Pat, Alexander, Joe, and others, they're in the full swing. They have more than 700 signed up for their tennis programming, and they'll start working with Nutrier and North Shore Country Day in the coming weeks, so that will be very active over at the AC Nielsen Tennis Center. Hockey, or the Winnetka Ice Arena, they kick into gear on September 11th, and believe it or not, the new Zamboni was received. That may equal the Elder Centennial Project, but we now have a new Zamboni, believe it or not.
It was a joy to see that come through.
Yeah.
That was hilarious. When Christine Berman said they were driving it down from Canada. That was
right.
Yeah, she might have been right.
Platform tennis kicks off on this weekend, so September 10th. Very active there. And the winter brochure with Gracie Durham's excellent help will be released on October 13th. So she's deep in gathering the information for that piece of the puzzle.
It'd be great to see the new paddle courts open up for the full season.
Yeah, they are fantastic.
Got a lot
Most of
more
the staff
people
have
out
been
there.
worked really hard on that. One last HR piece. We are working with New Trier High School. We have a new colleague, Dia, who is part of the transitions program. She works with us every day for about an hour and a half, and it's been awesome. I think she's had a chance to meet with staff members, primarily in the administrative office, and we're just thrilled to partner with New Trier for that program. The Winnetka Women's Club Tomorrow, 2:45, all the commissioners that can be there at Dwyer Park. We'll kick off the program for the recognition event at 3. Costa and the team will have everything set up. The plaque's going to be there. It'll be a fantastic event. So that'll run for about 45 minutes to recognize the Winnetka Women's Club and their restricted donation to support the Dwyer Park gazebo. Again, Kate and Gracie have been fantastic as well.
And that was the hard work of Cynthia Rapp and Mickey Arshin.
Yeah.
So thank you very much
for sure. Let's see, last but not least, the board self-analysis meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, September 13th, so that's next week. And it should be 6 o'clock start, and it should be no more than 90 minutes. Could go a little bit past that, but Peter Murphy will be here to host that program. So that's it, Eric.
Thanks, JP. Moving on towards board liaison reports. Any updates for tonight?
Just wanted to say New Trier.
No.
Oh, September 9th, Saturday, 2 to 4, self-guided tours for New Trier's brand new gym extravaganza. Go, take a look at your tax dollars at work. It's beautiful.
It's beautiful. It is.
Just for D36, I know that they have the IGA on their agenda. I presume it was approved or we heard.
It's the 12th. Theirs is the 12th.
No, I saw it was in their
Packet?
in their August packet.
Okay. I thought they presented.
Not the land.
The shared
I
use
mean, the
facility?
shared use
Yes, it was,
facility.
yes,
Okay.
approved.
The one
Yes.
that we had already previously.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
I don't mean to interrupt, but just for a second, I don't know if it's ever come up or whatever, but it was surely a nice gesture from the Park District Board if they had a plaque down at Elder Beach for Mr. Laley, who drowned on July 4th. Something to consider. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry to interrupt you.
Cynthia, sorry for the interruption. Any additional comments?
No, that's it. And thank you, Susan, for being here with the caucus and the excellent work on the survey.
Any other liaison reports?
So we've had an announcement of a donation, and I want to say thank you for that, because that's a considerable amount of money, and it's very interesting to us. And we do have, just to caution everyone, we do have a very robust donation policy. But I do want to say thank you, because I think that was a surprise announcement, and took me a little time to gather my gratitude. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Without any other items to address here, I'd like to, may I have a motion to go into closed session pursuant to 5 ILCS 120, Section 2C1 for the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of the public body. 5 ILCS 120, Section 2C5 for the purchase of lease of property. 5 ILCS 122C6 for the setting of a price for sale or lease of property. And 5 ILCS 122C11 for litigation when an action against, affecting, or on behalf of a particular public body has been filed and is pending before a court or administrative tribunal, or when the public body finds that an action is probable or imminent.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? Denise, if you could.
Commissioner James?
Yes.
Commissioner Rapp?
Yes.
Commissioner Root?
Yes.
Commissioner Tyson?
Yes.
Commissioner Lesson?
Yes.
Commissioner Kodo?
Yes.
That motion passes.
It's 9:11.